to go if everyone else
Let
is.
me make sure that we're okay. Yep.
I've got some really terrible music stuck in my head.
Okay, did we describe how we do this to Danny? We
Probably
we
not. That's
we
your job,
basically
Moss.
go 3, 2, 1, record, and have 25 seconds of silence with our mics open, and then we do a 3, 2, 1, 0. We all say zero at the same time, and that's our sync up for our audio engineer.
Cool.
We are streaming.
And when you are not on mic, you should have your mic off if you can.
But not during the 20 seconds after we
Not
start
during the
recording.
20 seconds of silence. Yes.
Sure.
25. Tony always wanted 25.
Probably only need
15.
Yeah,
10.
I don't think Rio needs as much, but it's habit,
Well, it's going to have my dryer on it for another 6 minutes.
I don't seem to be as loud as I usually am here.
I wonder if I should start a print on the 3D printer.
Sure. Why
Why
not?
not? Why not? That's what I was
Add
going to
some ambience.
Yeah, add a little mechanical ambiance, if you will.
I'm down. If you really want me to.
All right, let's
push
get
here.
this party started.
All right. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Ready.
3, 2, 1, record. And of course, I got no traffic during that time, whatever, so mine's going to be screwed. All right, here they come. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
We're good to go. It's your show, Bill.
Mary had a little lamb. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 406. This is episode 406.5, recorded on Sunday, the 19th of February, 2023. Living life and living happy. I'm Bill.
In a lots of pain. I'm Joe.
Still house hunting. I'm Moss.
And
I don't know where I am. I'm
Well-
Danielle Foré.
I was just going to say, and we have a special guest. I guess we didn't prepare as well as we thought we did.
Oh,
we have a
well.
special guest on the show today. I can't even tell you how excited I am to have you on. Welcome to mintCast, Danielle.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. Sorry, I
Yeah.
kind of jumped in there. I was like, I can do an introduction.
Jump in wherever
Yeah.
you want.
Right on, yeah, and please do throughout the rest of the show. At any point, feel free to jump in and correct me. If you don't, somebody else will.
Yell at Moss. It's one of our favorite hobbies.
First up in the news, looks like the end for Mycroft. Proton offers drive for everybody. Midnight BSD takes on Hello System. Fedora 38 now with full flat hub access. New transmission. Android 14 preview. Framework has new SSDs. New versions of Chaos, Chaos, and Parrot. Ardor and Clonezilla have new releases, and System D is the future. In security and privacy, several Pi packages steal crypto. Then on our wanderings, Joe's back hurts, Moss is underworked, and Bill is not. In our
And
intersection,
don't forget Danny.
yeah,
And
well,
Danny's got some too.
does she? Awesome. In our innard section, we have invited Danielle Foré to come and talk about her Elementary OS project and other changes. As many of you would be aware, there's been a recent major release, Elementary OS 7, codename Horus. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. First up in the news, looks like the end for Mycroft, and this is from the Register. And
No,
this
let
is
me take this one.
okay. Go ahead.
Mycroft AI, creator of a Linux-based virtual assistant, announced on Friday, February 10th, it would not be able to fulfill rewards for its Mark II Kickstarter campaign. Furthermore, without immediate new investment, the company will be forced to cease development by the end of the month. The company is now at bare bones employee count. Layoffs have reduced the staff down to 2 developers, 1 customer service agent, and 1 attorney. Mycroft AI ended up spending more time than intended on the Mark II hardware, and the move became expensive and detracted from software, which was what the company actually wanted to focus on, said CEO Lewis. But what truly killed the company and product, he claimed, were expenses related to ongoing litigation. In 2020, Mycroft AI was sued for patent infringement from what is labeled a patent troll. The company suing Mycroft AI, Voice Tech Corporation, dropped its litigation, but not before costing the startup deeply to the tune of $1 million. But there is also a bit more to the story. I mean, the V2 has been in production since before COVID, them trying to get it out to the public. The problem got to be not only the litigation that was going on and all the money that it cost them, but at the same time, all of the chip shortages and shortages in general from that time frame where, nobody could get a chip to do anything. And then also, along with that, they had decided to switch to off-the-shelf parts in order to lower costs, and then those weren't available anymore either, and they lost their entire staff and no longer had actual development going on. So yeah, I've always had high hopes for Mycroft, but I never really thought it was going to end up going anywhere.
Yeah, whatever
think they would have
developers
been-
they still have, they've been wasting all their time asking what are beans.
Yeah, and the price went from like $90 per Mycroft V2 to $300, and that's just untenable.
I think it's $399 now, and
It might
yeah,
be $399 now. It's still a lot.
Really rough, but and everyone had high hopes for it. But spending $1 million battling a troll that didn't even want to stay in the game, just wanted to cost you money. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I liked their initial offering of build this yourself using a Raspberry Pi and these parts here, and then here's the software, and this is how it works. And if they'd have done that for the second version, I would have enjoyed that too. Or I think they do like have it all open source, and if you can source it all, then you can do it yourself. But I don't know. I'd have to look again. But yeah, it's a pretty sad story.
It does seem like, under $100 is a good price point for like those little virtual assistants. Like I have the little HomePod Mini that I like, and I know people have the Alexa and Google Pucks, but once you get up to like $300 and $400, it's really hard to justify that for just a smart speaker.
Yeah, I mean, even the one, because I think the Mycroft one actually had like a screen as well, and things would pop up there. But even like the Facebook one that you can get with the screen, or I think Lenovo has one that has a smart screen on it. I just can't see them costing $300 and being worth it.
I think even Amazon and the likes of which are having a little bit of problem monetizing the entire concept. Just them alone. So if something like Mycroft comes along with a viable product, the only people that are going to spend that kind of money are going to be, the enthusiasts and the open source type people.
Yeah, Amazon just cut the price of their LadyTube to $79. So
Yeah, and if they can't get it right, then it's going to be real tough for anybody else to break into the market.
Okay, moving on. Use Proton Drive with any email address. This is from Tech Radar. Proton Drive has been particularly successful since its launch in September last year, registering over 1 million files uploaded per day in less than 2 months. Now, in a continuous effort to secure the online lives of more and more people, new Proton Drive users can sign up using any other third-party emails as a username. Prior to this, a Proton account was needed to access its file storage service. However, this created a barrier for those looking to only secure their sensitive documents instead. The provider believes that such a move will help internet users, quote, to gradually reduce their exposure to big tech's surveillance infrastructure, end quote, one step at a time. We know who they're aiming at, right?
Mm-hmm. I have not looked at this. I do have. Not sure how I feel because I set up a Proton drive for the other Linux OTC, and I paid extra for the extra storage, and I haven't used it yet, but I paid extra for it, and now this. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, well,
I
I've
should.
had the free drive since it was in beta, and I
How
use
much
it a
do they
little,
offer
but
on
I
the free
haven't
drive?
really. What's that, Joe?
How much do they offer on the free drive?
That's a good question.
Darn you with your good questions.
Well, I will just have to look it up.
Yeah, it's a good alternative for cloud storage without relying on hyperscalers or we're waiting on Moss. Audio engineer, cut this part out.
Mm-hmm. No, leave it in.
I'm not finding it, but I think you get 1 gig for free.
Yeah, I don't
It's not
imagine
much.
it's a lot.
It used to be everybody offered either 5 or 15.
Yeah. Well, I still use Box, even though they never did come up with a Linux client because they offer the most free space.
Yeah, so
it is one gig.
yeah, Mark Respawn in the comments said it's 1 gigabyte, one free email address, and 150 messages a day. Is that right? 150 messages a day? Meaning that's all the email you can get?
Per
I
day.
don't know. I might be all you can
I've never
send.
heard. That's the first I've heard that.
What happens
Well, we have a
when you
paid
run out
mail
of
account, but not an
messages?
unlimited.
Right.
They just sit in
Yeah.
the queue until the next day, and so if you get 300 messages, that's 2 days worth of stuff.
You
right
could
there.
have you could
Yeah,
you could have a queue running for like 3 years.
We have the paid mail account, but we don't have anything but free items for the other thing. We do not have an unlimited.
Just thinking about the thousands and thousands of emails I get a day at work.
I've got like 7 email addresses and they all get hundreds on each.
Okay. That's when you start using spam filters, Bill.
Right. Well, I mean,
I have to set up a slew of rules just to know when
Yeah,
important
I've got
things are
some of
coming
that.
into my email for work, and it's just you think I'm joking. There's probably like 100, 150 just rules to get different
Yeah.
or different emails to different folders so that I know what's happening just by looking at my folder structure.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Midnight BSD coming for people who don't like Hello System. This is from Phoronix. For those that may have tried the recent macOS inspired Hello System, not 0.8 release for that desktop focused FreeBSD based operating system. If that didn't satisfy your desktop BSD desires, Midnight BSD 3.0 is working its way to release as another alternative. BSD, or Midnight BSD rather, 3.0 is coming out soon as another BSD desktop OS that was previously forked from FreeBSD, but continues pulling in new kernel driver code. Midnight BSD is one of the few BSD distributions focused on desktop users and trying to make it breezy, make it a breeze carrying out daily desktop tasks. Midnight BSD 3.0 has been in development to succeed Midnight BSD 2.2, and there have been development snapshots published in recent months. From the recent status update, the 3.0 stable branch is pretty much ready. We may update SQLite 3 yet. The delay in the release has been due to issues with several imports. We're still working on those problems, but one can't ship a desktop OS without a working desktop. That makes sense. Import is the package manager for Midnight BSD. In any event, it looks like soon enough Midnight BSD 3.0 will be out as another easy-to-use desktop BSD option. Thrilling.
Yes, don't we love easy to use desktop BSD options?
I'm downloading right now. No, that's good news. From what I understand, and I don't use BSD. I've looked at it once or twice over the years, but Midnight BSD tends to be one of the easier choices for having an easy install and get it up and running. Desktop with BSD. It's just not my thing.
Is it Danny's turn to read?
If she would like to, I don't know.
Sure.
Do you want to do Fedora 38?
Okay, give me 1 second to scroll up here. I was down in the show notes waiting for the wanderings.
Don't worry, we have a wonderful audio editor.
I'm so sorry for all the editing that I'm about to put you through.
She seems to enjoy it.
Where is Fedora? Wow, it's way up here, huh?
Yeah, we got a
Okay,
long way to
Fedora
go.
38. Okay, this story is from OMG Linux. Fedora 38 offers unfiltered access to FlatHub. So full unrestricted access to FlatHub is coming soon to Fedora. The Fedora engineering and steering committee have okayed the proposal to provide users with access to an unfiltered FlatHub in the next release. Since Fedora 35, released back in 2021, you're able to enable access to FlatHub as part of GNOME initial setup that runs after first login, as well as from the software repositories panel in GNOME software. But the problem is that this doesn't enable access to the full version of FlatHub, which is what most people expect when they enable those options. So without further configuration, Fedora would only permit access to a filtered and significantly smaller set of software from FlatHub. And this is mainly because of some software's complicated distribution through FlatHub because it's proprietary, unofficial, or subject to stricter licensing regulations. So to get unfettered access to the full range of 2,000 plus apps currently available on FlatHub, you have to manually set up FlatHub from the command line or by downloading the Flatpak repo file. And enabling proper full FlatHub is one of the first things that a lot of people do after they install Fedora. But thankfully, that won't be necessary anymore in Fedora 38. When enabling FlatHub during setup or via GNOME software, the distro now gives you full access to the whole FlatHub and not just the heavily redacted filtered version. There will still be a priority. Apps will default to fetching the version from the Fedora Flatpak repo first, then the Fedora RPM repo, and then finally FlatHub. This won't affect anyone too much as most of the apps on FlatHub are not also in the Fedora repo or the Fedora Flatpak repo. Let me read that again. There will still be a priority. Apps will default to fetching the version from the Fedora Flatpak repo first, then the Fedora RPM repo, and finally from FlatHub. But this shouldn't affect anyone too much, as most of the apps on FlatHub are not in either the Fedora RPM repo or the Fedora Flatpak repo. But the simple yet important change will be reflected in the next major stable release, Fedora 38 Workstation, currently in development and due for release later this year.
Maybe we'll have to test out Fedora again. See how things go.
Yeah, that FlatHub thing was really kind of a point of contention for that project.
What? How it was so restricted? It wasn't
Yeah. People need to understand is whenever you have a distribution with a huge commercial imperative, that's going to be the thing that drives the decision making time and time again, you know.
You need stability with something that's used.
Yeah. Well, you also have to make sure that the things you do are within the law, and when you're operating in the United States, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I do find that can be really hard sometimes to communicate to people, is especially because the way that software patent laws and licensing and copyright and everything work in the U.S. is so restricted compared to other countries. It can be like really foreign to think about certain software being illegal to redistribute or use in certain ways. But that's kind of a legal reality that we have here. And if you're not careful, you could set yourself up as an attack surface and end up like Mycroft, getting stuck in litigation, and then your project's over.
Right. And, well,
Have you faced any actual issues like that?
I haven't so far. Like, I think we've been really good about following what some of the larger companies are doing and being like a little bit more cautious there. And luckily, we do have some people in the community that are more knowledgeable about like software licensing issues. So personally, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the details, but do our best to keep our noses clean.
yeah, because there's nothing more pathetic than somebody taking an open source project to court, which happens, but it's just the ultimate bully move, And I can see why Fedora would want to avoid as much of that as possible, because it does happen.
Okay. Transmission 4.0 is released. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. The popular Transmission open source, free, and cross-platform BitTorrent client has been updated today to version 4.0, a major release that introduces numerous new features and performance improvements. Coming more than 2.5 years after Transmission 3.0, Transmission 4.0 introduces support for BitTorrent v2 and hybrid torrents, support for IPv6 block lists, and a revamped web client with full mobile support with full screen and dark mode support. Other new features include an option to omit potentially identifying information like user agent and date created when creating new torrents, the ability to set default trackers that can be used to announce all public torrents, and the ability to specify the piece size when creating new torrents. Furthermore, Transmission 4.0 introduces configurable anti-brute force settings, the ability to fetch metadata of stopped magnets, support for changing the progress bar color in the GTK client depending on the torrent state, and an updated details dialog that includes the date a torrent was added and faster rendering of large file lists. Transmission 4.0 also starts newly added seeds immediately and verifies pieces on demand, rather than using the old method where a full verification was required before seeding can begin. Moreover, there's a new torrent added verify mode setting to force verify added torrents. There are also many under the hood performance improvements to make transmission use less memory and fewer CPU cycles. Also, the RPC API table mode is now used for both Transmission Qt and Transmission Web remote control GUIs, which results in smaller payloads and less bandwidth use. In addition, the entire code base has been migrated from C to C++. The GTK client was ported to GTK4 and GTK-MM. The web client was rewritten in modern JavaScript. The Qt client now supports Qt6. DHT bootstrapping was greatly improved, and Avatana indicator is now preferred over app indicator. Ayatana. The red line underneath makes that a little bit hard to actually
Ayatana.
read.
Yeah,
Ayatana.
Ayatana.
Okay, thank you. Ayatana indicator is now preferred over app indicator. Transmission 4.0 is available for download right now from the official website as a source tarball, but you'll have to manually compile. If that's not your cup of tea, you'll have to wait for the new version to arrive in the stable platform repositories of GNU Linux distribution before updating from Transmission 3.0. And there's a link to install the PPA on Mint and Ubuntu in the show notes. Now, I've always kind of defaulted to QBitTorrent over Transmission. I've never really been a fan of it. It was a little too... It seemed to lack some of the robustness of some other torrent downloaders. So,
I use them both depending on what I've got transmission on here. I've not been able to figure out a way to bind it to a specific IP address or a specific interface, which is a couple of options that'll keep you out of trouble, if you know what I mean.
Like I said, it's lacking that robustness.
Yeah, but
You
as
mean you
far
guys are downloading stuff other than Linux distros?
Of course not.
I'm not
Of course
saying
not.
that.
Never.
I wouldn't say that out loud, but there you go.
I would never.
No, you'll just let other
Okay.
people do it for you and then use their Plex servers.
Well, yeah. You got a problem with that?
Nope, none whatsoever.
Okay.
That was really good.
Android
Oh, yeah.
14 Preview 1 is out. Will officially ban installation of old apps. From Ars Technica, Android 14 is here, or the first preview is at least. Google is kicking off the month-long developer preview process for Android's latest version, which will get a final release in the second half of the year. Even with multiple previews, Google likes to keep the final set of Android features under wraps, at least until its I/O conference in May, so we can't look at the features here to determine the scope of Android 14. These are just some of the features Google wants developers to have a head start on. The biggest news is that Android 14 will block the installation of old Android apps. As Android changes over the years, new APIs and increased security, privacy, or background processing restrictions could break old apps, but Android's backward compatibility system keeps those old apps running. Apps can declare the newest version of Android they support via a target SDK flag. To prevent old apps from breaking, new features and app restrictions in, say, Android 12 only apply to apps that target Android 12 or above. Older apps will continue to run with the older set of restrictions they're used to. A different setting called minimum SDK determines if a new app can run on an old Android OS. The system works great for honest developers, but if you're building a piece of malware, it's an easy decision to target a very old version of Android. While you'll get access to fewer features, you'll also be subject to fewer security and privacy restrictions. For the first time, Android 14 will close this malware loophole by simply refusing to install old apps. The cutoff point is generous enough that it shouldn't cause anyone any problems. Any app lower than the 8-year-old Android 6.0 target will be blocked. Google says it picked Android 6 because it's the version that introduced runtime permissions, the allow/deny boxes that pop up asking for things like camera access. In addition, quote, some malware apps use a target SDK version of Android 5.1 to avoid being subjected to the runtime permission model introduced in 2015 by Android 6.0, end quote, Google said. Yes, it was Mr. Google himself. Users who don't sideload apps probably haven't seen an Android 6.0 app in years. The apps certainly aren't available in the Play Store. The Play Store implemented rolling minimum target SDK levels in 2018, requiring new and updated apps to target an Android version that's a year old or newer. So in 2018, the minimum SDK version the Play Store would accept was Android 8.0, and since it goes up every year, the minimum level today is Android 12. That requirement for new and updating apps means abandonware was initially still visible on the Play Store, but Google started hiding old apps last year, and now any app that hasn't been updated in 2 years will be hidden from the store. It also sounds like the core Android OS will cull app support every year. 9to5 Google discovered this feature when it first hit the Android code base, and there was talk of a progressive ramp up for the minimum app level in the commit. If you somehow still have an Android 6.0 app on your phone and upgrade to Android 14, the app won't be removed, Google says. If you really still want to install an app that old, an ADB command line flag, ADB install bypass low target SDK block space filename.apk will bypass the block. That requires a USB cable, a PC, and an installed Android developer SD kit, software development kit. So Google assumes you know what you're doing if you go down that path. The second most interesting feature is a new nonlinear font scaling idea. Android has had a font scaling feature for a while, but now instead of linearly making everything bigger and blowing up heading text, the feature will scale small text more than big text. If you use the font scaling feature, your problem is probably that some small font is too small to see, so this change makes a lot of sense. Along with this smarter font scaling, Google is bumping up the size limit from 130% to 200%. It's hard to say too much about the remaining features. Documentation is not live, and we only have a vague blog post to work off of. There are many changes involving streamlining background work, with Google saying it wants to be, quote, more opinionated about how foreground services should be used, reserving them for only the highest priority user-facing tasks so that Android can improve resource consumption and battery life, end quote. Again, direct from Mr. Google. Android is updating to OpenJDK 17, and while that's still a work in progress, Google said it is, quote, working hard to fully enable Java 17 language features in upcoming developer previews, end quote. Interestingly, the company plans to backport this work to older Android versions via the project Mainline's Android Runtime module. Google says that, quote, over 600 million devices are enabled to receive the latest Android Runtime ART updates, end quote. ART became an updatable mainline module in Android 12. We also got a new release timeline. As usual, there will be a monthly release with the easy install beta release starting in April. We will also highlight May as the Google I/O release, which usually has more in the way of consumer features. This says the final release will be sometime in August or later. Flashable builds, which are not meant for your daily driver, should be available on the Android developer site. Besides the emulator, Google says you'll be able to try this first release on a Pixel 7 Pro, Pixel 7, Pixel 6a, Pixel 6 Pro, Pixel 6, Pixel 5a 5G, Pixel 5, or Pixel 4a 5G. Update, the Pixel 4a 5G is getting the update, not the base model Pixel 4a. The Pixel 4a 5G launched alongside the Pixel 5, months apart from the Pixel 4a.
Now, you might think to yourself, well, who on earth is running a phone with Android 6 or below? But man, you'd be surprised how many people are running around with Android 5.
4.4. I mean, KitKat was
4.4.
extremely popular, and
They
it was
still
on
are selling
so many
tablets on
devices.
Android,
Yeah.
brand new.
Yeah. And so this is going to make some of those people unhappy, because I can name two of them right now that are on 4 point something or other, and they're being very stubborn about upgrading because they just can't be bothered. And
A lot of your devices that run 4.4 are not going to run 14. I mean, they're
No.
still good devices. The hardware is still good. They're just not getting those software updates. And why throw away a perfectly good working device? It's kind of a different conversation there.
And I
but
mean,
yeah.
it's once again, it's why I really don't get excited about mobile and all of that. I don't even think about putting something else on my phone, just because it isn't worth the effort for me.
It used to be, but it's not really anymore.
No. But yeah, good news, bad news.
Okay, there is a lot of news left. Do we want to just leave that in the show notes and let people read it if they want to and move on?
We never
Well-
did before. We've got time.
Okay.
Of course, it's up to Danny because her time is more valuable.
We're at
Can't hear you.
32 minutes.
You're muted.
You're muted, Danny.
Oops, sorry. I don't mind. I don't have like massive plans today, so
Yeah.
whatever works better for the show.
All right, let
Let's
me take
do
this next one then.
mintCast.
We're here to party.
Framework now offers Steam Deck sized SSDs just because it can. This is from Ars Technica. Steam Deck and Microsoft Surface owners looking to get more SSD storage than is typically offered and for less money have a new unexpected source, Framework, the repairable laptop company. Seeing the need for reputable vendors of smaller size M.2 drives, the company decided to add one more line item to its typical Western Digital drive order. As such, the company has started offering a 2 terabyte M.2 2230 drive for $300 in its US and Canada stores. As of this writing, the drives are sold out, but you can sign up and be notified when they're back in stock. Now, I'm going to pause reading this right here because this is actually a big thing. I don't know if anybody here has tried to look for 2230s or 2242s, but they can be rather difficult to get, which drives the price per meg up a lot.
Yeah, like
And-
4 of each.
Yeah, and the problem also gets to be the M key, the B key, and the M plus B key, and NGFF versus. There's a lot of stuff that goes there. So knowing that something works for a specific device, if that's what you're looking for, is also extremely helpful. Now, Framework founder and CEO Nirav Patel describes the move as an interesting opportunity to enable upgrades on another popular consumer electronics product, the Steam Deck. Patel notes that it can be difficult to find legitimate sources for larger capacity drives. The 2 terabyte SN740 2230 models from Western Digital that Framework will offer, Patel thanks iFixit's guide to upgrading the Steam Deck and Surface devices and asks Framework fans to let the company know about other ways to help you with hard-to-find upgrades for other products. We'll presume retail price GPUs isn't worth mentioning. As we noted in an article about the widening availability of teensy SSD drives, these drives aren't cheap, but they still provide large savings over the big OEM vendors' prices. Upgrading the Surface Laptop Go 2 from 128 gigabyte SSD to 256 costs between $50 and $100 if you buy from Microsoft or another retailer, and higher capacity drives aren't available. Microsoft will charge $300 to upgrade the Surface Pro 9 from 256 to 512 gigabyte and $600 to upgrade from 256 to 1 terabyte. The Steam Deck's various price tiers come with other non-storage related benefits, but going from the base model 64 gig of slow eMMC storage to 256 gigabyte SSD still costs at least $130. Buying from a name like Western Digital via Framework is also likely to be a better bet than purchasing from lesser known vendors on eBay or other marketplaces. While these drives are not Framework labeled and thus don't have the company's 1-year warranty, there is still a 30-day return policy and a wider number of support options. Framework's warranty language suggests that actual malfunction or failure response would be handled by Western Digital. Now, there are a lot of devices that you don't think of that would use either your 2230s or your 2242s. Like the 1GX actually has a slot for, I believe it's a 2242. It would be right there on the inside. And then like the Dell tablets that I use, all of those some of them actually use 2280s, but then they also have a secondary slot that can either be used for a SIM card, or you can put another hard drive in there. And those are usually either 2230 or 2242. Now, the main drives on the other Dells that I have are always 2242. And yeah, it's can be difficult to find ones that match key and match size. So just keep all of that in mind when ordering things.
It does seem like a really business savvy move if they're using these drives in their own devices and they're trying to keep prices down in their devices, trying to find ways to operate at those economies of scale by repurposing those drives just for resale is really smart.
And that's actually a really good price. I mean, 2 terabytes for $300 on a 2230. Yeah, that's kind of great. And you can find adapters to go from 2230 to 2242. So,
Bill, why don't you take Chaos and I'll take Parrot?
Very well. This is from, new versions of Chaos Linux and Parrot from 9 to 5 Linux and Parrot blog. Chaos. The development team behind the Arch Linux inspired yet independently developed and KDE focused Chaos Linux distribution released today Chaos Linux 2023.02 as the newest ISO snapshot with the latest updates and GNU/Linux technologies. Powered by the latest and greatest Linux 6.1 LTS kernel series, Chaos Linux 2023.02 is one of the first GNU/Linux distributions to ship with the just released KDE Plasma 5.27 LTS desktop environment, which is accompanied by the latest KDE Gear 22.12.2 and KDE Frameworks 5.103 software suites. This is the second GNU/Linux distribution, to my knowledge, after KDE Neon, to offer a live production-ready ISO image with the latest and greatest KDE Plasma desktop environment. More distributions will offer it in the coming days, but these are currently the first if you want to use KDE Plasma 5.27 LTS right now. As usual, the ISO comes with some of the latest GNU/Linux technologies, including Network Manager 1.42, OpenSSH 9.2 P1, CLang/LLVM 15.0.7, BusyBox 1.36.0, GNU PG 2.4.0, OpenZFS 2.1.9, Python 3.10.10, SQLite 3.40.1, Systemd 252.5, IWD 2.3, MPFR 4.2.0, Dracut 059, libtiff 4.5.0, and many others. No other major changes or improvements appear to have been implemented in this release, which is here only for those who want to deploy Chaos Linux on new machines or wish to reinstall their systems for whatever reason. And I looked at Chaos years ago and thought it was kind of cool. Interesting KDE approach, but it's always exciting to see a new release. Tell us about
I know
Parrot,
nothing
Moss.
about
We've
it.
got
so-
a new Parrot. What's that?
I know nothing about it, so
So there you go.
Okay, Parrot. What's new in Parrot OS 5.2? The Calamaris installer received several important updates to fix common installation issues. The Linux kernel was updated to version 6.0. Several security updates were included to fix important bugs to Firefox, Chromium, Sudo, Dbus, Nginx, libsSL, OpenJDK, and Xorg. AnonSurf, our popular anonymity tool, now includes better support to Tor bridges. Wireless drivers for several Broadcom and Realtek cards not supported by Debian received a major upgrade to include support for the 6.x Linux kernel, along with VirtualBox and NVIDIA drivers. Pipewire, the popular pulse audio alternative, fixed several stability bugs with a new version backported from Debian backports. Other product improvements: the Raspberry Pi images received important updates to improve system performance and fix the audio drivers. The Hack the Box edition received minor graphical updates. There is an easy upgrade to the new version if you're already using 5.1. Parrot's more of a security-based operating system. That's about all I know.
Which is more than I know.
okay. Do you guys want me to take the next one? Or
Sure.
Okay. Ardour 7.3 open source DAW released with VST3 multi-bus support, searchable preferences from 9 to 5 limit or from 9 to 5 Linux. The Ardour 7.3 open source digital audio workstation software arrived February 16th with more new features and a bunch of improvements for all of your music production needs. Coming 2 months after Ardour 7.2, the Ardour 7.3 release is here to introduced support for VST3 plugins with multiple I/O buses to allow instrument plugins to have dedicated additional outputs, as well as sample rate independence so that audio hardware sample rate and session sample rate no longer have to match. Ardour 7.3 also updates the UI to introduce support for searching items in the global preferences and the session properties dialog. The ability to reverse the polarity of an audio region, working undo redo in the recording page, and the ability to directly use the MIDI tracer on physical MIDI ports. Under the hood, the release supports the AVX512 x86 instructions to enhance its performance. However, the developers note the fact that the official Linux binaries currently don't include this feature, which will be added in the next release, Ardour 7.4. Other improvements include Ardour 7.3, our support for the quick export dialog to sort range markers by time, the ability to check all channel configurations before exporting, tapping tempo with a MIDI keyboard, as well as grouping of system ports by a common prefix. Example, by device. When using Pipewire, or otherwise having multiple jack clients exposing physical ports, the indices are even less meaningful than otherwise, as different devices could appear in arbitrary order. So also using pretty names for stereo bundles makes the UI less confusing in places where these bundle names are used. For example, the menu when clicking on an I/O button, explained the devs. On top of that, the plugin setup dialog will now limit options to stereo and all. When loading a plugin with more than 2 outputs, Ardour 7.3 also improves solo handling, monitor control, as well as do not reset fader to Unity on selection function for the fader port 8 control surface. Several bugs were fixed in this release and various language translations were updated. For more details, check out the full release notes. Ardour 7.3 is available for download from the official website as a source tarball that you'll have to manually compile on your GNU Linux distribution. Well, sounds like some good improvements were made.
One of my sort of long-term goals is I installed it because I wanted to see how easy it would be to use as an alternative to Audacity, and then I tried and failed.
It wasn't.
I ended up sucking my thumb. I'm not going to lie. But from what I understand, it is what our audio engineer uses to edit these shows. She seems to like it better. So that's about all the kudos I can give for it. It does seem to be a bit more robust. And but that's all anecdotal because I've never been able to create anything with it. So that's on my list of things to learn how to do in the near future. Because Audacity irritates me sometimes. I don't mind telling you. Just and I don't know if it's because only a limited amount of development goes into the Linux side or what it is, because most of the problems that I complain about are cosmetic or things of that nature. I don't have problems with the actual use of it or the end product that it makes. But Ardour seems to be a bit higher on the food chain, I think. Who wants to take the Clonezilla one? You want me to do that?
You can do that, or Danny. I think I'm up for the next one.
I can go ahead and tackle it. Clonezilla Live 3.0.3 disk cloning tool adds support for multiple Lux devices. That's Linux something. What does that stand for? I can't remember. Anyway, Linux 6.1 LTS. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. Clonezilla Live developer Stephen Shao, I apologize, announced the release of CloneZilla Live 3.0.3 February 16th as the third maintenance update in the latest CloneZilla Live 3.0 series of this open source, free, and powerful partition and disk cloning / imaging live ISO distribution based on the Debian SID repositories. CloneZilla 3.0.3 comes more than 3 months after CloneZilla 3.0.2 and bumps the Linux kernel from the now deprecated Linux 6.0 to the long-term supported Linux 6.1 LTS.
Okay, real quick. Lux is actually encryption.
Right. Yeah. What did you say, Moss?
I posted it in our general.
Yeah, it's Linux Unified Key Setup. So it's the framework by which you would use if you were going to set up an encrypted file system. And that's what most of the time, whenever you're in installing a Linux distribution, and for example, anything based on Ubuntu, when you go into the advanced options, it asks you if you want to set up a Lux encrypted setup. But to read on, starting with this release, CloneZilla Live now supports MKINIT CPIO in the initramfs updating mechanism when restoring Arch Linux systems and derivatives. Also, the new release improves the Lux mechanism to support multiple Lux devices and no longer clone encrypted swap data. A new program has been added to CloneZilla 3.0.3 called OCS Live Ver, which can be used to show the CloneZilla Live version currently running. Various other programs were updated to their latest versions, such as mintCast 86 Plus 6.0 and PartClone 0.3.23. Among other changes, CloneZilla now shows the live now shows the swap partition in the save parts dialog menu and adds better mechanism to handle both ways of saving the swap partition, which is by keeping the UUID / label or dumping by DD. Adds a tac power slave auth option in set term to prevent screen blanking in the console, adds the tac J2 option in the restore parts menu, and replaces the OCS BT track program with OpenTracker. Several bugs were addressed as well in CloneZilla 3.0.3 to improve converting of a disk image to the BT format and to patch the live config package to support the user crypted parameter. You can download the new release below for all of your partition and disk cloning imaging needs. CloneZilla Live supports a wide range of file systems, including ext2, ext3, ext4, Riser FS, XFS, JFS, FAT, NTFS, HFS Plus, UFS, Minix, and VMFS. It also supports LVM2 multicast as well as 32-bit and 64-bit architectures for cloning GNU / Linux, macOS, and Windows systems. My reading gets a little screwed up with all of the red lines underneath everything.
Yeah, about the only way to get rid of those is go mark each and every one of them as being ignore all.
Yeah.
Anyhow, anything more to say about that, guys?
You know, I've used it at like intermittent times over the years, and it just works.
Mm-hmm.
I think it clones on the block level, which is helpful.
Yeah, I use RescueZilla, which is a fork of it.
Yeah.
I don't know when these changes are going to make it into RescueZilla, but RescueZilla is basically CloneZilla with a better GUI. Easier to use, but both get the job done.
So you recommend RescueZilla?
Yes, and Leo recommended it to me.
Okay.
So it's got a regular GUI instead of just like a ncurses kind of thing, like the
Yep.
yeah.
Maybe I'll take care of that after the show today.
One thing is it's really useful for is when you've got your system the way you like it, you can just turn that into an ISO with RescueZilla in moments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then when you have to reinstall, you already have all the stuff you use installed in that ISO.
But then updating can be a problem if it's been too long.
It's true. But I haven't had a problem with updating on those.
So you could
Okay.
create an ISO from your system, including all of the settings, all of your installed
Right.
applications and everything.
Right.
Well, that's helpful.
So let's move on into pottering territory. System D253, you're looking at the future of enterprise Linux boot processes. From the register. The first System D release of 2023 is here, and it introduces a brand spanking new tool for building unified kernel image files. Fresh versions of System D appear roughly twice a year, apart from release candidates. We reported on the last version, System D252, in November last year. As we said at the time, System D252 brought in support for Agent P's new, more secure Linux boot process. Those two stories have details of the UKI boot files and how they work. That again would be from the register. The support and tooling for UKI continues to improve, and one of the headline features in version 253 is a tool for building these unified kernel images, which is called Ukify. As the System D release notes say, a tool, Ukify tool to build, measure, and sign UKIs has been added. This replaces functionality provided by Dracut UEFI and extends it. From the new program's manual page, note this command is experimental for now. While it's intended to become a regular component of System D, it might still change in behavior and interface. Like it or not, it seems certainly likely that UKIs will become the standard way to start many enterprise Linux distros, if only because of their support for automatically unlocking drives using full disk encryption by retrieving keys from the machine's integrated TPM2 chips. 3 of the last 4 new laptops that have landed on the Reg FOSS desk came with Windows BitLocker FDE turned on by default. The only one that didn't was Tuxedo Computer's Stellaris Gen 4, a gaming laptop with a multicolor illuminated mechanical keyboard. As a machine intended to run Linux, that's not really a surprise. Many users might never even notice it unless they try to dual boot the computer with a non-Windows OS and find that nothing else can read the disk. Never fear, we have described how to turn it off and make such a machine ready to dual boot. There are, of course, lots of other changes, but they should be less visible to most people. There's a new option to limit the amount of memory assigned to the compression pool if you use ZSwap swap area compression. ZSwap swap area compression, a feature added to Linux for workgroups, aka kernel 3.11 way back in 2013. We suggested enabling this last year as a way to improve the performance of desktops or laptops with limited RAM, and it can help quite a lot, but the price of reduced swap usage is increased CPU strain and the need for a block of memory for the compressed cache. As described in some kernel patches last year, ZSwap is a complicated tool, and its interactions on a system running lots of cgroup 2 containers is not easy to debug. Tweaks to the Systemd OOM killer suggest that this is still causing issues, as it did even back in Fedora 33, which is why Linux Mint 21 disabled it altogether. The Systemd boot tool, which is used in Pop! OS and caused us grief, now supports other ways of loading the kernel in the Xen hypervisor, and QEMU hypervisor / emulator, such as from locations other than the UEFI ESP. Handling of several file system issues has been improved. If Systemd finds a swap volume with a different page size than the one that the system needs, it will automatically reformat it, and it has better handling of an initRD that isn't a pure RAM disk, such as Overlay FS. There is also direct support for a technology we had not met before, HSSRE, or to give it its full name, Lockheed Martin Hardened Security for Intel Processors. Many won't like it, but expect System D253 to appear in the next version of most mainstream distros. If that thought is too much to bear, there is still a decent selection of distros that don't have it. And that's the news.
Good old System D. All right, so moving on to security and privacy. First up, 451 Pi packages install Chrome extensions to steal crypto.
The developers call that Pipey.
Pipey, okay. And this is from Bleeding Computer. Over 450 malicious Pipey Python packages were found installing malicious browser extensions to hijack cryptocurrency transactions made through browser-based crypto wallets and websites. This discovery is a continuation of a campaign initially launched in November 2022, which initially started with only 27 malicious Pipey packages and now greatly expanding over the past few months. These packages are being prompted through a typo squatting campaign that impersonates popular packages but with slight variations such as an altered or swapped character. The goal is to deceive software developers into downloading these malicious packages instead of the legitimate ones. As Phylum explains in a report published on Friday, in addition to scaling up the campaign, the threat actors now utilize a novel obfuscation method that involves using Chinese ideographs in function and variable names. Some of the popular packages impersonated in the current typo squatting include Bitcoin Bitcoin LIB, CCXT, Crypto Compare, Crypto Feed, Freak Trade, Selenium, Selena, Viper, WebSockets, YFinance, Pandas, Mat PLOTI, Matplotlib, AIO, HTTP, Beautiful Soup, TensorFlow, Selenium, Scrappy, Colorama, SCI Kit Learn, PyTorch, Pygame, and PyInstaller.
They mentioned Selenium twice in that article.
Yeah. Must be important. The threat actors use between 13 and 18 type O squatting versions for each of the above, trying to cover a broad range of potential mistypes that would result in downloading the malicious package. To evade detection, the threat actors have employed a new obfuscation method that wasn't present in the November 22 wave, now using a random 16-bit combination of Chinese ideographs for function and variable identifiers. Phylum's analytics discovered that the code used built-in Python functions and a series of arithmetic operations for string generations. So while the obfuscation creates a visually strong result, it's not very hard to break. While this obfuscation is interesting and builds up extremely complex and highly obfuscated looking code, from a dynamic standpoint, this is trivial, reads Phylum's report. Python is an interpreted language and the code must run. We simply have to evaluate these instances and it reveals exactly what the code is doing. To hijack cryptocurrency transactions, the malicious Pipey packages will create a malicious Chromium browser extension in the app data /extension folder, similar to the November 2022 attacks. It then searches for Windows shortcuts related to Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Brave, and Opera, and hijacks them to load the malicious browser extension using the tac load extension command line argument. For example, a Google Chrome shortcut would be hijacked to C/program file/Google/Chrome/application/Chrome.exe tac load tac extension equals app data escape extension. When a web browser is launched, the extension will load and malicious JavaScript will monitor for cryptocurrency addresses copied to the Windows clipboard. When a crypto address is detected, the browser extension will replace it with a set of hard-coded addresses under the threat actor's control. This way, any sent crypto transaction amount will go to the threat actor's wallet instead of the intended recipient. A list of regular expressions used to detect cryptocurrency addresses in the Windows clipboard and replace them with the threat actor's address can be seen below. In this new campaign, the threat actor extended the number of supported wallets and has now added cryptocurrency addresses for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tron, Binance, Chain, Litecoin, Ripple, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, and Cosmos. For a complete list of the malicious packages that should be avoided, check the bottom section of Phylum's report. And we have that linked in the show notes if anybody is all that worried about Windows installations getting attacked.
Yeah, all you have to do is run Firefox in Linux and you don't have a problem.
Sorted. Or Epiphany on Elementary. You still calling it Epiphany? Or is it just...
They call it GNOME Web.
GNOME
now.
Web. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have web extension support yet, so very secure.
There you go.
If you can't use it, you can't hack it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we've got for security. So on to the bi-weekly wanderings. You're up, Joe.
Well, it's been a pretty boring couple of weeks. My back has been hurting, and I've started up physical therapy again. Turns out the discs in my lower spine are deteriorating, slowly but surely. I'm a little young for it, but I've lived, and this is the proof. I've ordered a couple of items for projects to work on, including a low-cost 512 gigabyte micro SD card that only costs about $20. I have not noticed any issues with it yet, but I have not used it much. I did test it to make sure it was actually 512, but that's about it. I don't want to put any important information on it, but I do want to see how long it lasts. Prices are starting to come down on micro SD cards, and I hope that the longevity of those will increase as well. Now, I don't know where it went. It disappeared somewhere. It's a small little thing. I had it in an SD card adapter because I was using it to test out some hubs. But like I said, it works. The read-write speeds weren't great, but they weren't terrible. And I was going to see how long it lasted, but it got up and walked away. So I guess when I find it again, I'll let y'all know. Now, I also ordered a WaveShare Game Pi 20, which takes a Pi Zero and turns it into a little mini handheld. I thought it would be fun to try, and you know, we'll see. I did receive the item, but I guess I wasn't paying attention when I was reading the description. It says that it needs a 14500 battery for power, and that did not come with it, but it came with everything else that you would need to put together. I ordered actually 2 of these 14500 batteries, and they've arrived. But when the device arrived, it actually has a 14500 battery that's already soldered into position. Now, previously I had mentioned on before shows that I had found a couple of Pi Zero Ws, and that's what this takes. So that works out pretty well. But what I didn't realize, well, I did know that it needed the headers, but I thought that the headers came with the WaveShare, but it doesn't. So now the WaveShare got here yesterday, and then I had to order the headers, and they should be here tomorrow. So I haven't had a chance to put it together yet. and I still need to go out to the website and get the proper operating system with the drivers already there so that it just works, and then dump a bunch of ROMs on there and get to playing. So now I have to wait for the order for the headers to work. And 14500s at least are pretty useful. I mean, they're the size of AA batteries, but they're the 3.7. They're 3.7 volts. So do not put them in devices that use AA's. But you can use the cages and for the batteries and use them with other projects, or just wire directly to them, and it's a 3.7 volt battery. So I could use them in some of my Bluetooth projects that I have, and that would work out really well. So it's definitely not a waste. I have gotten stuff from Waveshare before, like they have a really large one that I had picked up that used the Raspberry Pi. What was it? I had the 3B in there, and but I gave it to my son, and that was probably a bad idea. He kind of destroyed it pretty quick. He broke the screen, he broke the thumbstick, some of the buttons, things like that. So I'll be removing the Pi from that and finding other uses for it. I also want to design and print just a closable case for it that I can throw in a bag so that I won't have, similar issues with screen breakage. And I'll let you know how that goes. I've been doing a lot more typing lately on my 1GX, like I said I was going to, but it is getting more difficult to get the time since I've been going to the office more and just, more stuff going on in general. I also found another use for Audio Bookshelf. First, a bit of background. I have a very extensive collection of ebooks, but this is all from when I was using PDA, the Dell Axum X51V, which was before my son was born. So that's been like 15 years. So, but they were all in like .lit format. I don't know if anybody remembers .lit format, but that's the format that Microsoft was putting out. So I imported that entire library to Calibre and then batch converted it to EPUB, and then had Audio Bookshelf point to the folder location. So now my entire older ebook library is available from Audio Bookshelf. The next thing I'm going to do is have Voice Aloud look at the download folder for Audio Bookshelf and then try out a couple of ebooks on my phone, and I'll let you know how that works. Hopefully I'll talk to the developer and see if he wants to eventually add some type of reader for ebooks onto there, which I think would be really cool, but I don't know how feasible that is. Now, working on the next iteration for the laptop dock that I've been making for the 1GX, which is right here if you're watching the video. It's not lacking in USB ports now. I have not mounted the last USB hub to the device, at least not permanently, but I have gotten the right angle USB 3.0 connector in place and attached another 4-port hub, and it sits snugly in the front. I'm not sure if I want to glue it into position or make something so that I can turn the hub backwards after connecting some semi-permanent USB devices. But as it sits right now, it has 11 USB ports, 6 3.0, 4 2.0, and 1 3.1. It also has 2 HDMI ports, one of them micro, one of them full size, and then 2 micro SD card slots and a full-size SD card slot. Which, while making it only about an inch and a half taller, doesn't really add to the width at all, so it's still very portable. I do want to add some like rubber feet to the bottom so it's a little grippy and doesn't slide around. But I still think it turned out pretty good. I mean, it almost looks commercially made. It really adds a lot of functionality, and like I said, it doesn't make it take up much more room. I really like how it's turned out. I might do some redesign or make a second one that just has some different functionality. But for now, I think this one has turned out really well. And I don't know if I'm going to put the STLs up on Thingiverse or not, because this is very kind of specific to me. Now, I did also, I had designed and 3D printed some fat grips for my forearm workout device, which is a wrist roller and is actually suspended from a ceiling to take the shoulders out of the exercise. I've had this device for years as a forearm exerciser, and it had just gotten a little too simple and too easy. So with the fatter grips on the sides, it actually puts a lot more effort into the forearms and reduces the mechanical advantage. So it takes more work, and it works out really well, and it is much more of an exercise. Just simple things you can do with 3D design and printing. I also redesigned the wide grip pull down handles that I had made because I didn't like that they weren't very comfortable, and the redesign actually was pretty comfortable. And I had a lot of problems getting it to print. It would break supports and make spaghetti every time. I eventually printed it standing straight up in such a way that there were no supports, and then found out that the hole that I had added for the screw was at the wrong angle on the STL from when I was redesigning all the angles, and I would either need to redesign it again and reprint, or I would need to drill and fix the issue. I chose to drill, which it worked pretty well. But also the hole, I didn't put it in the center, so I would no longer need to glue it to make it stable. With it at the bottom like that, it just stayed in place, and just being able to remove the screw to change it out is a good thing. Now, I did get it printed, and it looked really good. I had made the infill at 100% in places where the stresses would be the greatest, but because of the size of the hand grips, I tried to save on some plastic and did a 30% infill on the rest of it, or a 20% infill on the rest of it. Now, that worked well at first. Then when I put some heavier weights on the pull down, the handle snapped at the point where it transitioned from 100% to 20%. And that was in the essentially the actual handle portion itself, instead of along the lever portion where I had bulked up the infill. And that it was quite exciting when you got that much weight up in the air and then one of your handles snaps. And the plastic actually was pretty darn sharp, and it sliced up my fingers pretty good. You probably can't see it because the cut is so thin, but it is there. And just a nice little thin cut. I'm going to try to print again, probably with the whole thing at 100% infill this time. But I'm also going to remember to wear gloves the first couple of times I use a 3D printed piece of equipment like that, so I don't end up slicing my fingers off. I also watched a video of someone designing things in Tinkercad, and I found out that I was missing a lot of the functionality that Tinkercad has, and a lot of the things that I was doing the hard way, like centering. It has a much easier method that I did not know about, but I do now. Plus a bunch of shapes that would make things a lot easier for the things that I've been designing and doing. It gives me some ideas on designs that I was having trouble figuring out, including making a full design for a Bluetooth headset. Now, previously, I've been using a neck piece that someone else designed and just adding a couple of things to it. But for me, it's just a little bit too stiff. The design doesn't allow for a lot of mobility on that headpiece. It's just, I always feel like I'm going to break it when I'm putting it over my neck. So I want to make some changes to it. I'm going to see if I can find a few more videos on design in Tinkercad just to get better at it myself and come up with something a little bit better. That's really all I've been up to. And unless you guys got any questions, Moss?
That would be me. Well, I haven't been doing much lately, just keeping up on my podcasts. We've had some minor things going on, auto maintenance and a never before rent hike. We've got such cheap rent, and we've had it this cheap for 6.5 years. I'm not too worried about a $50 rent hike at this level. I I had 2 days of teaching canceled due to weather, and to date have only had one workday this calendar year. That really hurts hard in the bank account area, right about here. I had an idea for the next Distro Hoppers Digest that we should all take a stab at BlendOS, but we have each had different issues with it, so that might go by the boards. Maybe we expected too much of it, but the pedigree cannot be ignored. BlendOS is the latest thing from Rudra Saraswat, and it's only been out about 3 weeks now. So it probably works better than a 3-week-old distro should, but obviously there's growing pains. Most of my free time has been taken up with reading. I found a few authors I'd never heard of who can really sling their words well and have written large numbers of books, some of which are series, but not all. One author in particular I've been impressed with. Every book or series that she writes cannot be connected to the others. They have totally different systems of magic in them, totally different cultural setups. It's brilliant the way she does this, and I don't know how any one author can do that. But that's it for me. Bill?
And that's me. Well, it's been a bit since I've been on the show, and all I really have to talk about is the work I've been doing on the new show Linux OTC. After the release of episode 3, it was revealed that we had an echo intermittently coming from my mic as well as Leo's, or at least that was the perceived effect. After some sleuthing around, we discovered that the problem was coming from Norbert's track. Norbert uses an omnidirectional mic, which is useful when you need to put a mic in a central location, like on a table or something like that, and pick up everything that's going on in the room. Though in this case, it was literally picking up Leo and I from his headphones, which I was able to filter out from his track with a noise gate. So I ended up having to basically start from scratch and then re-upload and let everybody know to delete it and then re-upload it, which was kind of sloppy, but luckily the Linux community can be as forgiving as they are unforgiving. So I used Leo's guidance. He walked me through how to use a noise gate and get rid of that, and it worked out pretty good. Right now, the challenge I'm having is to, at the time I wrote this, the challenge I was having was getting the theme song to be at roughly the same volume level as the rest of the dialogue throughout the show. A couple people were complaining that if you listen to it directly from the website, that the theme song was loud, and I think it's every bit of about 6 seconds, but I mean, it is what it is, but I've since I wrote this, I've worked out a good method for fixing that problem. One thing that's been on my mind lately is my choice with regards to hosting my other 2 shows. As many would remember from a previous episode of mintCast, where I outlined how to set up a podcast, I described how I decided to use Red Circle to host the media files and generate the RSS feed. mintCast is uploaded to archive.org, and the RSS feed is generated by a plugin we've got installed on the mintcast.org. It's a WordPress plugin called Blueberry. At first, I thought it would be better to use a podcast provider to simplify the workload. Although this decision did provide some convenience, I'm starting to question the decision. When I set up the show, I knew I wanted to distribute the content under the same Creative Commons license that mintCast declares, but I didn't consider the idea that Red Circle may claim some intellectual rights to the content that we upload. With archive.org, we would never need to worry about this because, their whole shtick is Creative Commons. It's unfortunate. I didn't really know how to generate and maintain RSS feeds in the beginning when I first started, and I was really learning everything from scratch. And I know so much more now than I did then. And had I known then what I know now, I might not have made the same decision. Switching to archive.org now, in other words, switching our workflow over to something that more closely resembles how we do it on mintCast, would require listeners to have to search for and re-add the show to their players, which, is not a big deal mechanically. But if listeners don't know to do that, if somebody's like not listening to the episodes on or about the time that you're doing the switch over, and then all of a sudden you stop having episodes show up in their feed, they just, you might end up losing listeners, or at least that's the reality that's articulated in my mind. So what I need is a solution allowing me to migrate from one feed to another with the least listener hassle possible. If anyone knows of a possible solution, please email me at bill@mintcast.org or hit me up on the socials, and I'd love to hear anybody's opinions and or advice on that subject. But that's really all I've got. Danny's on the show, and she's participating as though she's one of us, and she's got an entry here. So how you been, Danny?
So I'm so sorry. My USB-C devices all got disconnected and Audacity froze. So I'm not sure what you want me to do. If we should do like a sync up again real quick.
Honestly, if there was a large time period where it was broken, then we're just going to end up pulling from YouTube.
Okay, yeah, like it.
Oh, we can do another sync just to make it easier on Rio.
I haven't said anything since it stopped, so
And then we should be
everything
able
that
to
I've
line it
said
back
is
up,
recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's hear a 0. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
There
Can
you
do
go.
it one more time? Do it one more time, Moss. I wasn't with it.
Sounded good. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero. All right. I'll have to.
Thanks
make
for
sure.
kicking us up on that, Danny.
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah,
useful to know.
sorry about that. I was freaking out. I was like, "Oh no, can I fix it?"
There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed
Yeah,
of.
sometimes you just have to save your Audacity stream and start another one and just tell them I got 2 streams here.
Yeah.
Let me get a time though.
It's been a while since I've had that kind of problem.
So this will be at 1 hour and 25 minutes. So
Okay.
Yeah, mine stopped recording at like 1 hour and 12.
Wonderful.
just wanted to mark that time on Audacity to tell her, yeah, right about here is where you need to have a look.
Okay.
And
cool.
reline it up.
Take it away, Danny.
Yeah, so lately in my personal life, I've been pretty focused on like my health and my fitness. I'm a big Apple Watch user, and I subscribe to Fitness Plus, and I have a lot of friends that use Apple Watch too. So we kind of like keep each other in check with the fitness app there. And I started using this app called Streaks to help me develop like a consistent exercise routine. I found for me that like that's one of the most difficult parts in like keeping up with my exercise is having some kind of like goals and routine. So Streaks has been cool because I could set up like this week, I want to make sure that I do like an hour of yoga and I want to walk for this many kilometers. And then I can kind of have structure without it being too rigid. And I can kind of adjust throughout my week and go, okay, you know, I need to still do some cycling. So I'll do that. So that's been really good. So I've been consistently cycling, walking, doing yoga. I completed a 30-day core challenge in January. And I'm trying to start getting into some of the kickboxing workouts too. So I'm pretty excited about all that. And then, you know, kind of over like the COVID lockdown, I got into a really bad habit of door dashing a lot. And I was spending a lot of money on like delivery and not eating too great. So I've been trying to get back more into cooking. I love cooking, and I think I'm pretty good at cooking. So that's something I've been trying to invest more energy into. But sometimes, getting to the store can be a lot. I got a lot going on. So I'm going to try out HelloFresh this next week. I ordered like a first box from them to see if it's any good, see if that's something that could work for me. But I've never done any of those kind of like meal delivery services things. So that'll
I've
be
used
interesting to find
HelloFresh.
out about.
It's good. They give you everything you need in perfectly measured out quantities, and it's almost, well, I won't say it's brainless. There's still ways to screw it up, but it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, one of the like home chefs I follow on YouTube recently made a video about it, and I've been kind of resistant to doing those kind of boxes before, but he was comparing it to like the price of regular grocery delivery, and he was like, yeah, like technically you can get more stuff, but especially if you're like a single person, and you just need a small portions, and it's kind of like you said, it's just kind of brainless. He said the hardest part is not getting ahead of the recipes if you already know what you're doing. So I'm excited to try that. But one of my other major goals this year is to explore my style more and build more skill with like my hair and makeup. So I was using Stitch Fix for a while to kind of build my wardrobe. But I got in a rut with that. So I'm trying to kind of branch out and explore and find different places to get clothing I like from. But I feel like the trends this year for women's clothing are weird. Or at least they're not my thing. Like bell-bottom pants are really big, I guess, again. And like all like the tops are like really boxy. And I just like, I don't feel good in those kind of clothes. So I'm really struggling right now with some of that. But
You're not a Jenkos person?
No, yeah. I'm like, oh, it's weird to see these kind of trends coming around.
The secondhand market is big around here.
Yeah, same here.
To women's clothing, yeah.
Yeah, like there are really good thrift stores around here, but it's hard because I'm like so much taller than like the average woman, right? So like the selection of things that fit me is like a lot smaller.
Now, here you mentioned just you were exploring your style with makeup and everything. My wife has been re-exploring her style with makeup and things like that. So if you'd like to, set something up with her, just let me know. And yeah, the two of you can collaborate and try and, figure out your styles together.
Just find out where your
change and stuff.
Just find out where your local college women's basketball team shops, and you should be able to find clothes.
Oh yeah.
Are you that tall? How tall are you?
No, I'm 5'9".
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that still kind of falls under the category slightly taller than average women, if you will.
Average is what, 5'6", 5'5"?
No, it's like 5'4".
Really?
Women's height.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, average men's U.S. height is like 5'7".
Okay. No, I pick on my daughter because she's like 5'4", and I call her short all the time. So.
Oh yeah, no, she's average women's height. Yeah, it's
average for
pretty wild.
Is she in the room, Joe?
No.
I had a picture.
I'll get her to listen to the recording later.
I had a picture taken with me and two of our best friends and my wife, and they were all sitting down, and I just was hovering over them so badly. It was horrible. That's when I started using the Gentle Giant logo on some of my instant messengers and whatnot. Go ahead. We're taking away from Danny's time.
Oh.
No, it's a good conversation.
Right.
Yeah, other than that, like the biggest thing I have going on is I have a surgery coming up at the end of the next week. So I've been isolating at home to avoid getting COVID. My surgeon actually got COVID, and my surgery date was delayed. So I've been isolating for a long time now, and I'm going to have like a 3-week recovery after surgery. So I'm feeling pretty cooped up, and I'm really looking forward to like getting able to go back out again and hang out with my friends, and especially as the weather is getting nicer and stuff.
Look, if you're stuck at the house anyway for the next several weeks, you can be on the next show too. I mean, we
I
love
knew that was
having more
coming.
hosts. Every time I try to get us more hosts.
Well, I'm trying to get back into some Zelda. Nintendo just released all the Game Boy games on Switch Online, so I'm playing Minish
Oh,
Cap.
Yeah, like
Pretty
the
important.
Switch. They've also they did the remastered versions of like GTA Vice City, and that's one of the only reasons that I actually want to get a Switch is to get the
It's
old school
so good.
GTA. Yeah.
I feel like the Switch has been like my best console for the value. Like I've played so many games on it that have just been amazing. That they're just hours and hours and hours of excellent gameplay.
Well,
Well,
it's so hard
this
to
show does
pick.
require a lot of time, so
Oh,
we
yeah.
understand not everyone jumping on it. After all, we were the only idiots that have stuck here this
It's
long.
burned up a lot of people.
Bill's still pretty new to this, but he's doing everything.
But I'm also like bought in now. So
Yeah,
I couldn't leave if I wanted
he's
to.
invested.
Because all the infrastructure is running on these machines behind me.
Yeah, we were talking the other day that if Bill dies, then basically, yeah, we have to rebuild the show from nothing.
We have to run to his house and steal all his computers.
Right.
It's nice to be important.
It's funny. I do feel like working like full time in like the Linux and open source space and working on tech full time. Like none of my hobbies are very techy, because it feels like work. I'm doing anything to not be at the computer.
Yeah, I'm just the opposite. I mean, my hobbies are just as techy as my actual work. Now, a lot of my hobbies lean more towards the hardware than the software, which is my work. But yeah, it makes work feel more like a hobby.
My problem is I've got too many hobbies in too many different areas. I don't have time for the ones I have, and
I have to rotate my hobbies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't relate to any of you because my work keeps me away.
You're a trucker. Yeah.
Yeah, my work keeps me away all week.
Well,
I've got some automation.
You could do some more with handheld gaming when you're on your trucking forays, and you have to stop somewhere at night. Just pull out the Steam Deck and.
Well, I've got 2 laptops that I take with me on the road to do various things. They both have different functions, but yeah, it's a lot to manage from the road, and then your brain. You've got to retool your brain. I don't even know how to describe the process of changing your brain over from this very rough and tumble blue collar world of being on the road with, I mean, everything that you've seen in the movies, and then coming here back into this world on the weekends. I do ride two very different rails.
Well, you try and split the difference with your Three Fat Truckers podcast. But
yeah, I mean that show's completely off the cuff, and it's basically just us talking a little bit of smack here and there, and we've got some news on there in that. 3 podcasts. I might be in a little over my head, but there you go. And it's a tough work-life balance,
If you want 2 more, I can get you on 2 more.
Oh, I'm at the max right now.
I'm actually thinking about one of those, Joe, but I'm sure my wife will kill me. Anyhow, we still have at least half a paragraph of Danny's biweeklies to get through.
Right on.
Oh, we were right there at the end, weren't we?
Oh no, yeah, I'm wrapped up.
We were there on the last one.
We even went more.
I also wanted to just discuss the fact that yes, I do want to Switch, but I also want a Steam Deck, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to afford both anytime soon. And if I do get them, I'm probably gonna play with them for like a week, and then they'll start collecting dust, much like my PSPs. So
I live in a virtually game-free environment.
I play Steam. That actually works really well on my one laptop that I take on the road with me. And
I'm on Steam a lot.
Yeah. And
I grew up with sticks and slinkies, and that was about it. And I was in my
mud and sand bits.
I was in my late 20s.
Did you push the hoop down the road with the stick?
No, but I had to flag down that dinosaur to get to work. School. Yeah. Uphill in the snow both ways in Los Angeles.
Well, you know, we didn't exactly have the internet at home when I was a kid either. Any of us. Really.
I didn't have touch tone phone at home
Yeah.
until the
It took.
90s.
I had rotary phones as a little kid,
Yeah.
little kid, but
We had rotary phones and the party line.
yeah,
I'm old.
same thing.
I bet there's a good portion of people
Look.
right now that are like, what in earth
W-
is a party
when-
line?
When I lived in when I was a little kid in small town Iowa, when I was living with my grandparents for a while, you could dial just the last 4 digits, and that would get you local numbers. You didn't have to put in like the 7 digits. All you needed was the last 4.
Yeah, we didn't even have area codes. We
You had the girl from New Jersey on the other line. Yeah,
no,
wait, who you
actually,
want to
we
talk
did
to
have
there?
direct dial, but I don't remember what we had to do to dial long distance because
So you needed
we probably had to get an operator to do long distance,
Probably had
but
to get a
local areas we
string
could
and 2
dial direct.
cans.
I'm old. I can't help it.
How often are you riding your bike, Danny?
Oh, pretty frequently. So I have like an indoor bike, like a spin bike, and I think
You got a
that's like my
Peloton?
no.
Oh.
It's a different brand. One I hadn't
Cheaper.
heard before, so I can't even think of what the name of it is now. But yeah, it was something that was. I'm a big fan of Wirecutter, the New York Times review website. So whenever I'm like, oh, I want to find out, to buy something, that's where I found the review for this bike.
So is it like the same idea as Peloton, where you got the screen in front of you and you're following along with an app and you're racing other people, Swift or anything like that?
It's just a standalone bike. It doesn't have like a screen built into it or anything like that, but I use it with Apple Fitness Plus. So I use it like in front of my TV. You could use it with like an iPad or whatever too.
Mm-hmm.
But so they do have classes like that, like spin classes you can join with an instructor and stuff. And sometimes I do those, but I feel like most of the time, like when I'm jumping on my bike, it's like, oh, while I watch TV or something, I'll just, get in like a half hour, 45-minute cycle, while I watch an episode of TV. And so it's a nice way to just kind of fill in exercise.
I love doing that. I love biking outside as well. But currently I was using like a trainer, a bike trainer. You put your bike on the stand and it sits there. But then I ended up breaking some spokes on the bike that had the proper axle to do that. So I have to get that fixed, and so I'm stuck riding the mountain bike outside. And it's too cold recently, so I've been lucky to get in once a week on that. But hopefully things will warm up, and I'll go back to like 3 or 4 times a week.
Well,
it's nice to have something that you can like fall back on when it's too cold or you don't really want to get outside.
While we're talking about Danny, why don't we move on into innards and talk about Danny?
Sure, why not? Moving on to our Linux innards. So yeah, we've got for our innards, we've got an interview, as you'd have to be asleep to not notice, with Danielle Foré from the Elementary Project. And thank you for coming on the show again. We do have some questions here. I feel like we're going to go off on different tangents, but it's okay. So first off, I guess
pick a rail, any rail.
Yeah. What got you started in Linux to begin with?
Yeah. So when I found out about Linux was around the time where like, do you remember like dig.com? Like pre-Reddit, they had like the Dig podcast and stuff. This was like, I think pretty early days of like podcasting becoming more popular. And like everything was, RSS feeds, and then Dig came out, and it was like one of the first like big like social media news kind of things before, Reddit or Hacker News or any of that was very popular. So Dig had like a technology section, and I started following more open source software like Firefox and stuff like that. And then one day they had this thing about Corora Linux, and it was this XGL live demo CD. And I didn't know what any of those words meant, but I knew that they had this thing where you could put an image on a CD and pop it into any computer, and it would boot up this desktop that wasn't Windows and it wasn't Mac OS, and all the windows were 3D animated and they exploded in fire, and you had the cube, and it was compiz stuff, right? So that was kind of my introduction into what Linux was seeing this thing of like, there's a completely different way, a completely different third way that you can run a computer that is like infinitely open and free and different, that you can make it into anything you want it to be.
Wow, that's cool. So what made you decide to, building on that, what made you decide to make your own distro?
I think that came from more of like this idea of, as I started getting more into figuring out what I wanted my computer to be like getting more into like visual design and mock-ups and things like that, and exploring some communities like gnomelook.org where people were sharing mock-ups, and I kind of started to build up like a little community, and I got some of my mock-ups published on like OMG Ubuntu, and it attracted some developers, and we started working on patches to different applications, and so we had like a little community of application developers trying to do interesting design things, and we wanted a way to put it all together into like a disk image or like an experience that we could install and not have to like build everything from scratch every time. So it's kind of like more of a thing of necessity, or like a showcase, or like trying to figure out like, okay, like, we have all these like disparate parts, but how do we put them together into something that we can share?
Oh, wow. So the distro that we're talking about, of course, is Elementary OS. Can you just give us kind of the elevator pitch on that distribution?
Sure. So Elementary OS is definitely focused more on regular people. We bill it as a replacement for Mac OS or Windows, and it's really focused more on just your regular computer user on laptops and desktops. Like we're not building like an enterprise product. We're not focusing on like big government contracts or trying to get into like industry or anything like that. It's just something that's really human centered. And so we've always kind of been about combining like the technology and the power of open source software with like human centered design principles.
So I've heard people say in jest, of course, that it reminds them of Mac OS just at a first glance. And would it be fair to say that you've taken a lot of design influences or inspirations from Mac OS in the way that?
I would say no.
Okay.
We actually we came out with an article like several years ago where we're talking about like kind of our design origins, and the Pantheon desktop is an evolution of where we were with GNOME 2. So that's kind of where we started, was the GNOME 2 desktop, and then we started kind of picking and pushing at that. And so really that's our biggest like foundational design thing is GNOME 2, and not really anything else. But as our visual design and stuff has started to evolve, we've taken hints from languages like Material Design. Mac OS is really not a forethought. It's like one of those things where it's like we're gathering like, okay, some like design research from different operating systems. It's like one of the ones you look at, but it's never like a big thing. It's never a main source of design inspiration.
Yeah, because I've often thought, because I mean, as well as I do, you hear it, people have said it, but I think that those people are just people that see it like a picture of the desktop sitting on a screen, and they've never actually used it or interacted with it, and then they compare it to a picture of Mac OS on a screen. I think that's got to be where that comes from, in my mind anyway. And then when you get to using it, you see that there's a lot of very bespoke influences going on there. But so it's written here in the notes. What are some of the design influences behind Pantheon? Is it like I see you've got Nintendo written as one of them.
Yeah, so when I'm thinking about like where does my design background come from, and like what are the biggest principles that push what I think of as good design, um, a lot of those like good interaction patterns do come from like game design from companies like Nintendo. And like there's this great quote from I believe it's Aonuma, who works on the Legend of Zelda series, and he talks about like when he's putting together a design team, the kind of people that he wants to work with are people that like are really interested in like mountain climbing or scuba diving, and not people that are so interested in games. And I think that's like such a like a experienced focused approach to team building, where you're really looking at like what we're doing isn't about games, it's about fun. And I think that's like something that I always try to keep in mind, is like we're trying to build an experience, we're not trying to build an operating system. And when you're thinking about like design principles, like obviously Dieter Rams comes to mind, and Braun and his 10 principles of design. And like one of the biggest ones that I always think about is good design is honest. And so when I'm going through a design, and especially thinking about like interface copy, like what is the kind of language that we're using? Is this copy honest? Does it actually represent what this thing is doing? Are we in any way being like, are we glossing over what is actually happening? Are we really explaining things? Are we really having an honest interface here? And so that's like super important to me, is like Dieter Rams' principles design really good. But another, kind of out of left field ones that people don't think about is like Bruce Lee is really interesting for me. And his Jeet Kune Do, his martial arts style. Like if you read his book about what Jeet Kune Do is like the style of no style. It's like this idea of decreasing extra. And so he talks about like, the daily work isn't about building up more, it's about taking away all the unnecessary things. When people when his students would ask him like, how do you punch faster, he would say, you punch faster, because that's all it's about. It's like doing the least motion. And I think that's really like an interesting way to look at design too, is like, how do we make a great interface? Is like do less, reduce the amount of work that a person has to do to have the experience they want to have.
Now, that is extremely interesting when it comes to Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do. But I don't know anything about Dieter Rams.
Yeah, Dieter Rams is a hugely influential designer. There's like the iconic era of like Braun design, industrial design. If you look up the 10 principles of design by Dieter Rams, I feel like that's something that like a lot of designers look up to. And actually a lot of like the industrial design, like Apple industrial design, when Johnny Ive was there, like Dieter Rams is like one of his big idols.
Oh, cool. So you've recently had a major release upgrade to version 7. Horace, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What are some of the major changes you'd like to highlight for that version?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things for me in OS 7 is just kind of like we've kind of gone through everything with the fine-tooth comb, and we're really focused on like our user feedback and trying to think about like what are people telling us of the experiences they're having that they're unhappy about, and where can we improve those. And so there's a lot of like changes to settings, or to the way like workflows are handled, like the side loading workflow, especially, or experiences with alt stores. People were saying they were kind of unhappy with the way that was presented. So a lot of work has gone into improving that. And just little settings and features to make you feel more comfortable if you're coming from other operating systems. Cross compatibility with alt stores like FlatHub more. The feedback app is like a huge highlight. Something that's really important to us is getting feedback from the people who use Elementary OS. So we made this app to make it really easy for you to report an issue about any of the pre-installed components. Accessibility features, like when you're setting up for the first time, if you're a left-handed mouse user and you click using the right mouse button, we'll ask you, hey, is this your primary click button? You want to switch to a left-handed click mode? So I think it's just like all the little details like that add up, or are kind of the most important things.
The accessibility story is, I mean, I don't know that it's fair to say not enough work gets done in that area. I would imagine it requires a very skilled set of developers to be able to work on these things, and an option like that. I remember you talking about that on Destination Linux, and I thought, oh gosh, you got to know people are going to be happy about that, because left-handed people tend to be marginalized, I think, when it comes to their user experience. So you was talking about App Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How is App Center on Elementary any different from, like, for example, we've got what do we call it? Software Manager on Mint. How do you think App Center might be a little bit different in terms of how it works and what it offers from other application stores?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Mint Software Manager, but kind of like App Center is built around both the front end desktop GDK app, but also the App Center remote, which is a Flockpack remote. So it's more about building like a complete app store experience and not like a package manager front end. So when you're opening up App Center, like pre-installed on Elementary OS, what you get is applications that developers have written specifically for Elementary OS. And some of them are paid apps too. So we want to make sure that indie app developers are able to be paid for their work, like you see in other mainstream application stores. So that's kind of, I think, like the definitive thing about App Center is that it's an app store experience and not just like a package manager front end.
Right, and I can say I installed Elementary on KVM here on this machine, and I can, just to describe how it kind of worked for me, I opened the App Center, and of course I looked for Audacity, and that's not available. What you're presented with initially is the curated apps by the Elementary project, and
Well,
and
we don't make these apps. They're community made. They're
well,
third party apps.
okay,
Yeah.
all based on Flatpak, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so what ends up happening then? You search for a package that's not initially offered, like Firefox or something like that, and it tells you that I can't remember the exact wording, but there's a link there to FlatHub, and then you're taken off to FlatHub to install in what it felt kind of seamless to me. But once you install that first FlatHub application, you basically have Flatpak or FlatHub rather in the software store in the App Center. All the other stuff starts showing up then when you search for it. Is that right? Is that how that was supposed to work? Or
Yeah, so I think that's something that we're trying to do is make sure that the experience of side loading apps or that using alternative stores is a smooth experience. And we don't want to create like a walled garden. Flatpak is a decentralized technology, right? And so I think like what would make a really healthy Flatpak ecosystem is have to have lots of different stores. And so I think that's something that I really want to make a core part of the experience on Elementary OS, is that adding alternate stores is something that we expect people to do and that it works well.
yeah, and it was rather seamless. And then I tried to install a paid app for free. I installed Torrential, and you just reduce the amount that you want to pay for the app to 0, and it installs. It says try for free, and then just to see how seamless the process was, I uninstalled it and then paid for it, and then I found that process to be really kind of easy with the credit card transaction and all that, and quick, and there wasn't a lot of. Sometimes paying for stuff can be a little cumbersome, but I found that to be really relatively simple. And then it installs, and then you got it, which is kind of cool. And then like I said, you've got FlatHub. Then now, do you use Stripe on the back end for the payment processing? Is that how that works, or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, all the payment processing is secured through Stripe, and Stripe actually handles the App Store split as well on the back end. So when you purchase an application for a developer, the only thing that we get from Stripe is the platform fee for like hosting, and then all the rest of everything goes directly to whoever the developer is for that app.
That is awesome.
We had talked about how that is working in terms of how monetization is getting out. And I think we're switching to a minor key here. How has that been working for you, Danny?
I mean, for elementary, App Center isn't like a profitable venture. It's not something that's a profit center for us. I think sometimes we actually lose money on it. It it's pretty much just like paying for itself as far as elementary is concerned. For app developers, we're looking like in terms of like what is the scale of income is probably more just like beer money at this point. I don't think there's anybody like making a living off of selling their apps in App Center. But what I have heard from folks is that it is more than what they're getting when they have like a donation link on their website, compared to other things. So it's a little bit better, but there's still a lot of room to be like what it's intended to be.
Okay, people out there, we are shaming you into spending money on open source. It's worth it.
Well, we could talk all day about funding open source, and I think it feels like we're starting to emerge from the darkness in terms of that subject. I want to be.
No, I think that there's been some more highlighting of the issues involved with not, putting money towards open source
Right,
and,
the results of
all
that,
the
yeah.
backing that open source projects provide to even major corporations that don't really feed money back into it. But I'm not sure that that's actually elicited any type of change in that arena.
Yeah, I want to be optimistic, but of course, anything I know would be anecdotal. So in the wider Linux world, distros like Elementary OS and Mint seem to get categorized together. What I mean is, whenever you hear somebody describing Linux, they'll say something like, "Yeah, you've got your more venerable distributions like Debian or what have you, and then off of that comes Ubuntu, and then you've got derivatives such as Elementary and Mint." And we kind of get lumped into that category together. What do you think are some of the, without knowing a lot about Mint, what do you think are some of the things that might set Elementary apart from other distributions that kind of fall into that category?
Yeah, I think like for the most part, compared to a lot of different distributions, I kind of look at it as like the philosophy behind the way we build Elementary OS is a lot less like a greatest hits album and a lot more like a concept album. So if you think about like a lot of people, when they're going into building a distribution, they're like, I'm going to pull in all the most popular stuff, what everybody likes the most, and then we're going to ship that. And that's a great model, I think, for people, especially coming, from other operating systems that want the familiarity. If familiarity is like the most important thing to you, like doing that kind of greatest hit style build is awesome. But we want to do something that's a little bit different. And like I think in the way that I've talked about like App Center, that we're not just building like a Linux-based operating system. We're trying to build like a computing experience. And so we're trying to build something that's cohesive and where when you touch a part of the interface, it's all meant to be together.
Right. Okay, so you're on Elementary 7 now. Is there an easy way? See, we've got tooling in Mint to upgrade from version 20 to version 21. Is there an easy upgrade path from 6 to 7 in Elementary?
At the moment, we're still recommending like a backup and a reinstall, and we actually have like in our wiki, we have like a recommended method for a backup and reinstall there. Technically, you can do some fiddly stuff in terminal, the same way you could do on other distributions. Your success rate may vary. Like there's always tools and ways to do things, right? It's Linux-based operating system. Things can be done. But as far as like something that we feel proud of shipping, we're still working on it. A big part of what we did in App Center in this cycle is we built out an offline updates process. And so we're trying to leverage that for release upgrades as well. And there are some like upstream things that we're relying on shipping that weren't available when we had OS 6 built and some other things like that. So we have some technical blockers, but I'm hoping that very soon we will have a process that is like one of the best and easiest ways to upgrade between releases.
Okay. I think nuking and paving, as they say, or backing up and then reinstalling, as you say, is probably still and will probably always be the best and more performant option to go.
Yeah, it definitely gives you like a cleaner install environment and make sure that you don't have anything weird left over from older versions.
Right. Because you do end up building up a lot of cruft over time, and it's why I've got 2 machines I run Arch on, and you've got people in that community that are just absolutely philosophically opposed to nuking and paving. But even on an Arch system, maybe especially on an Arch system, you're going to get buildup of cruft over time, and the only way to ensure that you're starting with something clean and performant is to nuke it and start from scratch. The next one here, what is your release and upkeep process for Elementary Incorporated? Online banking, mortgage, personal loans, investing. I'm not sure. Did you write that one, Moss?
I did not.
Okay, so what? That must have been you, Joe. Oh, interesting. Well, because it's somebody put that in there. It wasn't me, and it sounds like
Londoner must have.
Okay. It sounds like whoever it is asking some.
How do you finance an upkeep?
Yeah. I was looking for
Sure.
a delicate way to ask a rather personal question.
Yeah, so Elementary Inc. is it's a U.S. based company. We're a C corporation. We're a Stripe Atlas company, so we use a lot of kind of the stock stuff through Stripe Atlas. Stripe Atlas. If you've never heard of that, it's like it's kind of like a template for startups to be able to easily set up a company. So they have like a lot of recommended stuff that they're like, hey, sign up with Stripe Atlas, and here's all your forms for starting a corporation, and here's like some template forms for like drawing up shareholders and all that kind of stuff. So it just kind of makes it easy to make a legal entity. So I'm currently using one of the banks that they recommend, which is Silicon Valley Bank, and I don't totally love them. So I'd love to switch to a different bank at some point. But we have like a bookkeeping company that they recommended, but other than that, I try to keep the company as simple as possible. I use a payroll company. I use Gusto for payroll. I like them. But there's no outside investors in Elementary. We don't have any loans right now at all. There's no like big assets that you would have like a mortgage for. There's no like big company assets like that. So it's all pretty simple. Like we sell the operating system online, do everything as above board as possible, just as a regular C corp, and there's no nothing too complicated.
So you're not beholden to a bunch of people with money interest involved.
No, and that's super important to me,
yeah.
is not having that outside investor influence.
That's awesome. Okay, so it can't be ignored that you are an individual who has made some choices in life. that some personal choices, and if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about some of that right now. You've I suppose it's been about a year since you've transitioned.
Yeah, it's been about a year and a half, um, and definitely, I would say the choice is being closeted. The choice isn't transitioning, right? Like
Okay.
I was born trans. That's part of who I am. So I made a choice not to be closeted anymore.
So you made the choice to come out of that, to be who you truly are, nothing more and nothing less. Is what I guess is what I
Right.
meant by
Yeah.
that. And so I remember I've followed you on Twitter for years now, and I haven't said a lot, but I've watched some of the things you said, and
He
um, I
just
re-
admitted to being a stalker, Danny.
that's what Twitter is, though, isn't it? I mean, you're reading the stuff other people, they don't necessarily accept you as a friend, but here you are listening to their. I still haven't been able to get the process down, but I remember reading, and when you first announced on, I think it was on Twitter, at least that's where I read it at first. I remember worrying a little bit about, because I know how people around here respond when somebody announces that they are uh, taking steps like that.
Something other than normal.
Yeah, well,
You're in
normal.
Indiana.
Gee
I've
whiz.
been there.
Yeah, we're in a really twisted part of our culture where um, more people are being themselves and being authentic about it, and more people are attacking those people.
And
And
Yeah.
first,
I would definitely like to say that being queer is very normal.
well, I mean, you're in California, if you came here,
blame it on
Look,
California,
look,
right?
you have percentage wise, you actually have probably the exact same percentage of people that are gender non-normative just about everywhere,
yeah,
or queer, or any of the other labels that people put on things like that. But it's just more hidden in a lot of places, because in a lot of places you get a lot more judgmental, excuse my language, pricks that are going to do stupid things.
yeah. And I never really I didn't read like a lot of comments that you were getting in response to the things you said. First off, I commend your bravery. I really do.
Thanks.
I mean, it was, it's kind of a inspiration, I think, for people who are exposed, um, who, right or wrong, your perception, the way people perceive you as an individual may or may not have a direct impact on the project that you are working on, and to have the bravery to be yourself is really quite something. And I remember when I first started reading, and then I could sense the frustration that you were having in some of your messages. I started to worry if maybe the project would suffer as a result of some of this, and clearly it hasn't, because we've got
Let her say that, Bill.
right. Well, okay. I'm just
You
trying to set it
tiptoe
up.
so nicely that we don't get to a question.
Um. So what?
Has it been harder for you?
Yeah.
Has it gotten easier? How do you feel about this?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely being a public person. There are a lot of disadvantages, and especially being a trans person. A lot of people, I don't want to say that there's any way to transition that's privileged, because there isn't, but there is a lot of people that kind of enjoy a little bit more anonymity in their transition. And there's a lot of people that are trans that you've interacted with that you would never know it, because they're what we call stealth. And that's something that I'll never be able to have, because you can search my name on Google and find me anywhere. So being a public trans person's hard. But I'd say like the most major effects are less on the company and more on me. Being a trans person and being a woman, I don't think has any effect on the way that I design or develop software that's any different than it has been, my entire life. Like I've always been about inclusive design and human focused design and things like that. But you definitely expose yourself to both transphobia and misogyny on the internet.
And that's an ouch. I mean, that's getting it from both sides there. And I've seen some of the things that women have to go through in tech, even in like my job as production support, where I've had the people that work under me, the women that work under me, I've had some of them that I've actually had them change their emails and change their signatures so that their names were more masculine, so that I did not have to keep going behind them and re-explaining the exact same thing that they just explained in the exact same way. But because I'm a guy, I got listened to the first time, and because they were a girl, everybody wanted to argue with them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's true. And it's kind of a funny experience, like finding out which things are, because even prior to transition, like trans femmes experience misogyny in a different kind of way. Like we experience trans misogyny, right, where we're told that there's something wrong with us because we're too feminine. And then when we transition and people view us as feminine, then we get all this stuff about, you're a woman, so you couldn't possibly be competent.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about in Olympic sports where they're trying to go back to genetic testing of female athletes. And we're going, but we did that in the 80s, and we found out that most of the women athletes that were born women have Y chromosomes. It really makes it hard
or
to say,
higher
well, you can't.
testosterone levels naturally, which is odd. But there is something to be said when it comes to transitioning and Olympic sports, because if you look at things like weightlifting in particular, someone that has had those higher levels of testosterone as a male their entire life, and then they transition, that means that they've spent more time being naturally able to bulk up. So there is an argument there, and I'm really glad I'm not one of the people that has to make the decisions on whether or not that's valid.
None of that is actually true. Like if you look at all the peer-reviewed research, that after about a year or two of transition, that there is no discernible difference. And I know, especially from like my own transition, that the muscle mass melts off quick. I struggle to open my Gatorade bottle sometimes. I've dropped off. I can't do a lot of activities as hard. It's in your blood, it's in your bones, it's everything. Like hormones change your body so fundamentally. And if it were true, if trans women were somehow superior athletes, then they would be winning things, and we aren't.
Well,
we aren't winning.
When it comes to,
there are a few exceptional individuals, but there are a few exceptional individuals that are born female too.
Right.
Where this was coming into the public notice was one in MMA, where a trans woman was just dominating. And they were saying that it was because of the transition, and that she had naturally built on more muscle from being a man in the past. And then there was also in weightlifting with certain Olympic level weightlifters setting world records that were women that had transitioned as well, and they were just built like guys essentially. So
if you look at actually women that are in the same height and weight classes, that there is no difference. Like all the peer reviewed science says that there is no difference. So even though editorials and headlines try to make it seem like there's something, like the scientists are telling us that that's not true.
So since you're now in a more, I would say, your natural state, you're sort of metaphysically freed in a way that this has this affected or has this improved like your ability to how has it affected your I'm sorry, Moss. How has it
How's
affected
this
your
changed your life, your
yeah, how's
outlook?
it well, I mean, has it now that you've freed yourself of all this, has it improved your designing or your work with like elementary and all that? Do you feel like it's affected it in any way?
I don't really think that has like any major impact on my work besides um, people seeing me as a public figure in a different way. But in terms of the way I do my work, it's the exact same. Like I have had, people tell me that seeing me doing this kind of stuff makes them feel like they belong, that makes them feel more accepted. And I'm really appreciative of that kind of thing. But as far as like me as a designer, me as a developer, like it's all the same.
That's good. Because one of the things that I worried about when I first started seeing the the tweets, was whether or not the project was going to suffer. Because I know what would happen if somebody around here in this part of the country made an announcement and then went through with that kind of thing.
Well,
They would lose support on pretty much everything they had going on in life. And
I actually see it changing here.
that's interesting.
That dynamic. And this is central freaking Texas, and I do see it
That's why
changing
it's
with
interesting.
the younger generation, especially. Like my daughters have friends that are discussing their transitioning or wanting to transition, or I think Rain, who came by earlier today, has actually started the process, but I don't know all the details. And it just seems like it's generally more accepted around here, and more people are announcing, and it's not really having that heavy of a negative impact that I can see on their lives. Now, there are still a lot of the establishment that has issues, and I know we discussed this last weekend where I was talking about the school board trying to bring a trans bill, or well, not a trans bill, but a trans bathroom thing to the schools specifically, since they couldn't get it through the state, where any individual that wanted to go or use a restroom that wasn't based on their birth gender had to come before the school board and basically, give their names, the fact that they're there for the transitioning and to use another bathroom, and to basically dox them, make their very public that they were transitioning, make it very public that where they live, who they are, and all that. And that did not pass, thankfully, and it got completely cut off, even by some of the establishment that was already there. But it's still really disappointing to see that thing. But I still think that there has been a lot of improvement around here specifically.
Yeah,
Yeah, that kind of thing is pretty horrific to see happening. And I guess that is one thing that luckily I feel like conference organizers are already ahead of it. But like I would not feel comfortable traveling to certain states anymore if there was a conference there. Or there's certain countries where if I travel to, I will be jailed for being there. It's if they find out that I'm trans. So it is in some ways, yeah, like those kind of things, I guess, do affect my work a little bit in terms of discrimination. But it, it, yeah, it's just pretty horrific to think about in general as a person, because, like, I don't belong in a men's restroom. And, if I went in a men's restroom, I'm putting myself at risk of assault. It's that's a scary place for me to be.
the restroom discussion is always going to be the most difficult because, I am.
No, look, if I walked into a restroom and there was a woman in said restroom, I would immediately turn around and walk back out and double check that I had walked into the right restroom, because I would assume that I messed up. And then if there was still a woman in there, I'd be like, you know what, I'm gonna wait out here for a few minutes.
My fear.
I'm not sure I would do that. I think, oh, there's a woman in the restroom. Okay, there's plenty of room for us both. I'm not going to mess
Yeah.
with her. She's
Well,
not going to mess with me.
Yeah, but with the urinals up in the front, there's actually some laws that would equate that to what's the words I'm looking
Exposure.
for? A sex crime. Yeah, exposure, and you could be put on the sex offenders list for that. So I'm gonna wait out in the hall.
Okay. Well,
As a father of a daughter, you know, when these subjects first started coming up, because I've got my son, pretty much 90% of his friends are transgender, and the discussion first comes up, and from my point of view, I'm like, well, I'm in this strange place where I really I accept people the way they are, and that's because I expect people to be nothing more and nothing less than what they absolutely are. And the only fear I've ever had is not of people that have transitioned, but of the people that would take advantage of which might not be a rational fear, but the people that would take advantage of something like that to go into a girl's restroom, you know, for nefarious purposes and that. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I
but most of those people are the people that were going to find an excuse to do something
yeah,
stupid anyway.
and that's absolutely
Yeah,
true.
there's not any security guards at restrooms stopping men from going in there and sexually assaulting
Yeah.
women now. And by the numbers, you know, trans women are getting assaulted in all kinds of bathrooms wherever we are. We're just getting assaulted wherever we go. We're not the ones, you know, perpetrating stuff on any kind of scale. Like there's obviously bad people in any group of people, right?
yeah,
Like
they must
trans
be
people aren't
mistaking you
perfect,
for
but
Republicans.
but yeah, we're statistically that's, you know, we're not doing that.
Have you noticed a difference though in say the last 20 years with how people are treated if they are transgender, effeminate, or effeminate men, or anything like that, or butch women?
Yeah, I think like in general, you're talking about like gender non-conforming people in general, right? Which I wouldn't consider myself gender non-conforming because I'm very femme presenting, you know. But in
Right.
terms of like people that are obviously like gender non-conforming, it's in some ways I feel like that there is more acceptance, but in other ways I feel like they're getting more harassment from people who think they're trans, and especially for more mask presenting women, gender non-conforming cis women are being harassed because people think that they're trans women. So I think it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you know.
So the
Well,
elementary
no matter
project,
what, we have a long way to go on all levels of civil rights.
we do, but
Yeah.
I can tell you 100% we are way ahead of where we were when I was in high school. I've got a memory of a young man showing up for his first day of school, and he was dressed effeminate and acted as such, and he was not treated well, and I don't remember him coming back to that school after one day. And now, I mean, oh gosh, I mean, the high school I went to has got so many people that probably wouldn't have done well in my day. So I really want to believe that we're emerging somewhat, and this is in
They'd
the
have done more
Midwest.
to hide it back in your day, though.
Well, that's what I mean. That speaks volumes as well. I think, though, that people felt as though they needed to do that. And as I said before, my son is a freshman in high school, and four of the he's got like 6 or 7 main friends in his little clique, and at least 4 of those are I can't tell you if they've medically went through the entire process, but they have transitioned at least from the outside. Um, and those kind of people just would not be able to get through a single day, as I remember.
I just don't see how whatever is in their pants is actually any of my business.
Nope.
Yeah, and at that age, it's very, very rare for there to be any kind of medical intervention besides puberty blockers, which are totally reversible and actually were developed for cis kids who start puberty too early. So it's unless you've been on puberty blockers for years and have been seeing a psychologist for years and have been in the system, and you're like 17 and are gonna start HRT anyway when you turn 18. Like there's like very, very few exceptions where you would actually be allowed to take HRT as a minor person.
And if it's difficult where you live, I can imagine it is downright impossible here, legality wise.
Yeah. As an adult, I had to go through multiple psych evaluations with multiple doctors over months to be able to be prescribed HRT. As an adult, it was difficult just to get on HRT. And any other step of transition, there are long waiting periods, and they make you reevaluate. I've had to continually had psych evaluations for different things. I've had to talk to different, multi-specialists, this and that, and sign things and take classes and take, there's waivers, and like it's a really gatekeepy process. And that doesn't even include all the legal stuff, to change my identity documents. I probably spent $1,000, and it took me, 6 months or more just to get my identity documents changed. Whereas a cis woman gets married and just, marriage certificate, boom, there's your last name. So
it's honestly
difficult.
the same when it comes to changing the last name of even your kids after a birth certificate has been made without an adoption or anything like that. It's still costs that much. Or if I wanted to change my last name, it would still cost me like $1,000 to get that done, which does suck. But
would you say that psychological process that you went through, would you say that that's appropriate, given that maybe people might not always know from one week to the next who they are? Or do you think
I personally think it's too gatekeepy. If there are people that start HRT and then it turns out that that's not for them, they know quickly. Like in trans communities, I have seen people say, hey, I started HRT and I feel worse. And they know fast. Like, if your brain chemistry is not compatible, or if you immediately feel better and things, like
make more sense.
It's like if you it's hard to explain what this is like, but when I've talked to actually cis women about going on and off birth control, where they're experiencing like certain symptoms of brain fog and things like that, it's like that kind of experience where right away if your brain chemistry is getting better or getting worse.
And of course, we never hear about that particular aspect of transitioning in the media. They don't want to think about what changes. Like you said, if you're not meant to have the hormones, then your body will not react well to them. Well, you've never heard that in the press. I haven't.
Right. Yeah, and it takes a long time for hormones to have any effect. Like for me, I don't think that I started passing with any high rate. And what I mean by passing is like people seeing me and assuming that I'm a woman. I don't think that happened to me until like 6 to 9 months on hormones, where people started seeing me and immediately saying that is a woman. So it's not a fast process. There's a lot of time for you to go, oh, this isn't for me. Then it have not really any lasting effect at all on you.
So to get back on the elementary subject wagon, so the project has not suffered as a result whatsoever. People haven't left in droves, it turns out. Has that happened? Has it not happened?
No, as far as I know, I don't think that there's been anyone that stopped contributing or anything like that for that reason. At least they haven't told me that, or I haven't heard anything like that. All our major contributors are still there, and I've received words of support from people, and our community is still strong and doing what we do. And if anything, I've gotten more messages from people that either weren't publicly trans, that were like, hey, by the way, I'm trans too. And it's been a cool part to be a part of the community, stuff like that, of finding out that other people that I've worked with and, the expanded like general open source community are trans. There's a lot more people working on open source software that are trans or trans adjacent or, queer in some way than you may think.
Well, that's really encouraging because I really kind of thought about that in the beginning, like, well, gosh, because I know around here what kind of reaction you would get. Or, I mean, it speaks volumes to the quality of open source people, I think, that we can be honest about who we are and we are accepted for that.
Well, I think we've also seen a lot in the open source community about acceptance on other levels. For instance, we've had a lot of youth come into Linux and they get just glommed onto. It's not go away, kid, you bother me. It's look at all what Rudra has done.
Yeah,
and
they tend to be amazing. That's the thing. You can't get past it. So
I really think the open source community in general is a more accepting community than most in the US.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's also international. So
right.
I think we have a lot to thank like GNOME in particular for like their culture of acceptance. Like I've seen more with people who interact with the GNOME community as far as like being accepting of people's different, cultures and gender identities and sexualities and things like that. And especially GNOME related conferences and stuff too. Like there's a real strong sense of community there and being inclusive.
Great. Well, we could go on and on for hours about all of this. I suppose we should probably move on. I thank you so much for coming on and talking about all this stuff. I really do.
Yeah.
For sure. We enjoyed having you. And like Joe says, you can come back anytime.
We need people.
Well, thank you very much for having me and giving me a space to talk about these kind of things.
Oh, anytime. And we mean it. So if nobody has anything else, we'll move on to vibrations from the ether. And we've had some emails. We've had some interaction. You want to take this one, Joe?
Hold on, give me a second. I have to reload the show notes because evidently they broke while I wasn't looking.
Yeah, mine did too.
Yeah, you got to... I bring it up in LibreOffice and read it that way.
I put in some updates.
Well, yeah, Bill, but then you don't get to see who's claimed an article.
I know. But there's nothing worse than being in the middle of reading something and then all of a sudden it scrolls all the way to the top. And
that's true.
As I recall in yesterday's discussion, we have all these emails aimed at Joe, and I thought I would read the email and Joe would respond.
There you go. Yeah.
They weren't really like aimed at me. It's just I responded to them because I saw them first.
Right.
I keep the email brought up so I can see them.
So anyhow, Brad Alexander writes, I figured I would throw in another lighter email with a hardware recommendation. My lovely bride and I just celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary last week on January 23rd. I had been looking to replace my e-reader since I was still reading on my Nokia N900's 4-inch screen with tiny fonts. I decided that my eyes ain't getting any younger, so I started looking at e-readers. I didn't want anything with an ecosystem, since I have somewhere north of 1,000 EPUBs and PDFs in my Calibre library, and Amazon and B&N both have vested interest in you buying their own proprietary formats. Kindle's only started supporting EPUB formats late in 2022, if you can call converting the EPUB to AZW3 format support. So it came down to the Kobo Libra 2 and the Pocketbook era. The reviews I read were neck and neck, and what finally pushed me toward the era was that Kobo appears to want to develop their own ecosystem as well. You can only listen to Kobo branded audiobooks on Kobo devices. The era has been great with its e-ink Carta screen. It not only has tap gestures to turn pages, but physical buttons, unlike the comparable Kindle. Plus, the accelerometer lets you rotate the reader to any direction and the text will adjust, but so do the buttons. It also has decent text-to-speech capabilities, and I have listened to it read to me while cooking or doing dishes. The only thing I wish it had that it doesn't is night mode, where you can have white text on a black background, but I'm about to make a feature request. Anyway, if you're looking for a 7-inch e-reader, this one comes highly recommended. B. Joe?
And then I responded, man, crazy as this is, I am going to be discussing converting my ancient.lib format ebook library to EPUB on the show. And I'm also looking for an e-reader for my daughter, and I'm thinking of just using a cheap Fire tab. That was my response, and Brad had more to say.
Where he said, actually, if you use Caliburn, you can do the conversions pretty simply. In fact, I think you can do batch conversions. In fact, I just did several Plucker ebooks, talk about a blast from the past, to EPUB. They were from 2010, so most of them are outdated. For your daughter, a Fire tab would probably be fine. For my old eyes, I wanted e-ink and the ability to do a little bit larger fonts. But as I recall, I'm in the same age range as Moss. For me, the text-to-speech is becoming one of my favorite features of the pocketbook, because I can fire up the Bluetooth and have it read to me while I'm cooking or wander around Costco or whatever. Well, for me, I like e-ink myself, but I haven't been able to justify shelling out for one. I am using a Fire tablet.
There are some older e-ink Kindles that are still pretty good, but they get harder and harder to put books on from Amazon because they like to block that type of thing. But I had responded, yeah, I use Caliburn to batch convert all of them, and it turned out pretty good. They are all from when I was using my PDA, the Dell Axim X51V, on a regular basis, so sometime before or around 2010. I use Voice Aloud for my books that I cannot find in audio, but I do it on my phone. Examples, the Garrett PI files and the Aubrey Knight series. There are also some audiobooks that are just poorly read or of terrible quality, and I just prefer the straight text aloud. And I also want to mention that, yeah, I just looked it up on my Caliburn library, and there's 12,213 separate books on there. But I think the conversion and everything else, I only ended up with something like 8,000 in audiobook shelf. But I do like it that it's made my entire library accessible without having to put it all on my phone.
Well, being the Luddite in this group, I'm the person that likes to read to people, not be read to by someone recorded it a long time ago. I do have several friends, including my wife, that I read to on a regular basis, and I'd rather have the text. I'm sorry.
Well, if you're interested, it's all on my audio bookshelf, and I know you have access, and you can just click up there and go from books to ebooks, and you'll see the entire library.
Okay. So ZenFloater2 writes, I'm an older developer, started coding in 1966 on Fortran for Raytheon. I suppose I would have to agree that most people don't give one shit about using snaps versus Debian files on Ubuntu. So in that spirit, I'm using a Chromebook. I run OpenBSD for my server at home and use Slackware and Trisquel and sometimes Devuan and Fedora, and even have Linux Mint on one of my machines. But I now have 4 Chromebooks and feel that a Chromebook is a better alternative to Ubuntu if you want updated apps. I've written proprietary software all my life and am Lawson and SAP. I also drive a truck for a living now in my retirement and love to piss off brokers. I personally don't hate you people or mintCast as a podcast. See, I've listened to TLLTS since the beginning and have listened to Dan Wasco bitch about COBOL for at least 20 years, and I'm just sick of his bitching, just sick of it. Dan was one of the last Slackware users, and now he's using Ubuntu servers and Macs for his main driver. He's like Doc Searles in that they are all using Mac OS X now, and they bitch at us for helping develop micro-focused COBOL for the cloud. Geez. I'm also a member of the FSF and support OpenBSD with cash money. I love both projects, which makes me some kind of trans freedom person, LOL. Google has promised to support my Chromebook now for 8 years. 8 years! That's longer than Alma Linux and RHEL has support. The older you get, the higher the walls become. X11 is being purged in favor of Wayland. Disappointments there. System D just sucks. I can remember when Pat on TLLTS was bitching about having to use Pulse Audio. Pat felt also was enough. We all have complaints. At least with Chrome OS, I don't have to with anything anymore. but they have absolutely no GTK2 support on this thing. So anything you use, audacious in the Winamp interface, gets stuck into the center of the screen like split loogies hanging from some elementary school bathroom ceiling. Slackware or Trisquel for my Linux needs, but I find myself right here in the Chrome OS most of the time, as that's just dependable and light and has extremely long battery life, and everything is up to date and modern. Hard to beat. Signed, Charlie.
There is a lot to unpack here with a lot of really cool stuff going on, but I had responded. We have a guest lined up for the next show, but I think we would all love having you on as a guest or a host if you have the time. Bill might even ask you to do 3FT. I would love to discuss old Raytheon with you, and sounds like you and Moss would get along talking about OSs, and we would love to hear more about your opinion in regards to Chromebooks. Like I said, there's a lot to unpack here of just epic coolness. I mean, working for Raytheon, writing in Fortran, OpenBSD, and
Sounds
then
like a
transitioning
grumpy
to
old
trucking.
man.
Yeah. I'd love to talk to this guy more. And he did have a response.
And he responded, I appreciate it, Joe, but I can't commit to any kind of schedule, unfortunately, with my life. I will make an HPR episode at odd hours of the early morning sometimes when I have time, but typically I'm driving somewhere during the daytime and just can't do this. But I also wanted to say the same thing you hear often on Destination Linux, in that typically the laptop hardware you find on Dell and Lenovo is adequate, but not as brilliant as any of my 4 Chromebooks. The screens on these things are much better and easier to read, and the microphone they build into them is high quality, good sound too. I have to admit, Joe, that I'm coming back to these Chromebooks over my other laptops, mainly because of their brilliant hardware and exceptional battery life and just outstanding Wi-Fi. So here's what I do. I have a Think Penguin laptop with Trisquel on it, and I have Easy Tether installed, and I hook that laptop into my Android phone's internet using Easy Tether. Then I hit the hotspot button on Trisquel and log this Chromebook into that, and I get commercial bandwidth on my Chromebook. I keep thinking that the stupid bastards at Google will give us a better bandwidth alternative on the Pixel 5G phones, but I don't know that they actually did yet. They should, but until I'm sure they're going to treat Chromebooks with the same bandwidth like treating their Android to the cell tower bandwidth, I will keep doing what I've been doing and use truck stop Wi-Fi at other times. The Chromebooks all simply outperform my other laptops when using truck stop Wi-Fi. It's so great to be able to take a small Chromebook into a restaurant with me and use the internet from their Wi-Fi using a Chromebook. Battery life is often in excess of 10 hours, you know. I should make a program where I take a Pi 400 and put Alma Linux on it, load the Easy Tether driver on it, and permanently turn on the Wi-Fi using System D and just use the Pi as an interface modem for my purposed interface to cell bandwidth. That would be a good thing for us all to have. Then I could cut my stuff down to a Pi, a cell phone, and a Chromebook. Signed, Charlie.
Truck stop Wi-Fi.
As long as you have a VPN and it's solid, then I'm okay with using public Wi-Fi.
Well, imagine a router that gets like roughly 3,000 people connected to it a day that never gets restarted. And imagine the kind of performance you'd get out of that. And,
I hear you.
Yeah. I just never use it.
You never use it at all?
Very seldom. It has to be somewhere where there's a few places that are known for working really well. Most of the time I just tether off of my Android phone. And
I'm surprised you haven't set up something to like deauth everybody that isn't you.
There's things you can do. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not that great. I mean, well, it's not built for people like me anyway. It's
power users.
Yeah, it's built for people that just want to do basic things. And most of the time the new Verizon plans, I get 25 gigs a month hotspot. And that's
his method gets around that because with your Android phone, you usually get unlimited, not 25 gig, not anything like that. You get unlimited as long as you're not tethering. And his Easy Tether method is a way that's supposed to get around that. And I do discuss that.
I've not tried that. Yeah.
Because there are some catch-alls there that end up being a problem. And I had responded, that does sound like an awesome setup. I've been a big fan of Easy Tether in the past, but I've found that T-Mobile can detect it and slow down the connection to tethered speeds. Maybe that has changed since the last time I tried it. I'm glad to hear how useful Chromebooks are. And if you find yourself with some free time on one of these Saturday afternoons, jump on the Discord while we are on and maybe talk about it there. It's free form and whoever jumps in can talk. The Pi 400 build as a dedicated Easy Tethered WAN LAN setup sounds like it would be fun to do and super useful. I'd love to talk about the setup and the scripting that would need to be done to make it work properly and maybe bounce some ideas back and forth. Mobile travel networking is one of my favorite topics, and I have done some interesting things with fuse mounts and scripting auto connects based on network status. Plus, I know the whole team would be interested in talking more about old school development and Raytheon. And the main reason I personally like Dell systems is most of them are lower cost, and I have yet to find one that has trouble running Linux, from tablets to XPS 13s. Not the greatest quality devices, but they are workhorses that are easy to keep running and were built with repairability in mind for most of them. Easy to tear down, repair, and put back together. And I do, want to add a couple of things there. I'm sure that there are exceptions when it comes to like Dell, and I'm also quite certain that the screens on Chromebooks are better, but this just for general workhorse, low costs, and getting it up and running with Linux and out doing whatever you want. They are perfect, and from my experience. And then System D. If you said that you didn't like System D, so I've set up scripts within System D to do things with networking when you're expecting the network to drop and pick back up randomly. So I'd love to have that conversation. I'd love even more to do it on the show, but I understand time constraints as well.
What's your hardware story, Danny? What stuff are you running?
Nothing particularly interesting at the moment. I have a mini desktop that's like a NUC based desktop that's from Laptop with Linux. They're one of the vendors that you can buy Elementary OS pre-installed with. So that's my main desktop that I use. And the laptop that I have is a Lenovo Yoga. I think it's a 900. I don't remember. I've had it for like a long time, but I got it because it's like a 2-in-1 convertible. So it has the touch screen and you can like flip the keyboard away and stuff like that. So I have devices that I've gotten to do specific types of development things with.
Yeah. Cool. Got another letter here.
We do. We have Brad Alexander.
Again.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Just finished episode 403 and had a couple of topics. You don't have to read it on the show since it is turning a little bit ranty. Guess I wouldn't be an ideal host on mintCast, huh? Big smiley face. You shouldn't say things like that. You might get an invitation.
Oh, he got an invitation.
First,
will
I got all
absolutely
sorts
get
of
an
jazz
invitation.
for Audio Bookshelf until I looked at it and realized it was a Docker only. From my little
It's not.
experience at work, I tend to loathe Docker and how it makes a mess of your file systems with its accumulating thousands or tens of thousands of overlays that accumulate over time, that it rarely gets updated and so forth. Plus, I have converted my home network to FreeBSD, so I was going to stand it up in a jail. Insert sad trombone. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Well done.
The second thing, and hopefully I don't sound too Debbie Downer, but Flatpaks irritate the crap out of me. Weren't the Flatpak, Snap, and app image package formats created because of the competition between Deb and RPM and so forth? But Red Hat threw their weight behind Snap and Ubuntu behind Flatpak and so forth. I think backwards there.
Yep, a little backwards.
Yeah, Fedora uses Flatpak and Ubuntu uses Snap. So anyhow, so we have a different arms race. Except these package formats, it each installs the way I understand it. Each and every library that the app in question needs, even if it's installed many other times. Plus, I had to install Firefox on an Ubuntu 2204 box, and the only way it would install was via Flatpak. I was never able to upgrade it. Luckily, I found a page that told me how to install via Deb, and it has been happily updating ever since.
All right, pause right there, Moss. I can already see The look on Danny's face. Danny wants to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it's only AppImage does that. That's the only one. Like Snap and Flatpak both have a concept of runtimes, and since Flatpak uses OS tree, it actually does file system level deduplication too.
Yep.
Okay. Honestly, this is part of the reason I went to FreeBSD. The main part is systemd and its general brokenness, and the fact that it has caused Linux to diverge from a traditional Unix-like OS more toward the one thing to rule them allness of Windows. Pottering once said that they wanted systemd to, quote, own everything between the kernel and the application layer, end quote. But there are a few recent developments that have really turned me off of Linux. And I have been doing it for the better part of 30 years. You all mentioned ZFS and snapshots and how ZFS on boot is unnecessary. One of the things that I truly treasure about ZFS boot environments is the ability to completely roll back if an upgrade goes sideways. I have had it save my bacon on more than one occasion. I actually had a case on one of my TrueNAS boxes at work where I did an upgrade and could no longer open my storage pool. I was able to roll back to the previous release, get the storage online, and then figure out that the new version no longer supported the driver for the storage, an ancient card. Now, even before I do a package upgrade, equivalent to an apt upgrade, I create a before upgrade -date boot environment so that I can roll back even if, say, an updated NVIDIA driver doesn't work. Anyway, I've ranted long enough. Have a good one, B.
I gave a short response to this. My first response was, yes, you would be perfect as a host on the show. Also, not using the Docker image for Audio Bookshelf. I'm not using the Docker image for Audio Bookshelf. And then I gave the link to the how to install the deb. So it's not the Flatpak, it's not the Docker image, it is just the straight up deb. You pull in the deb and you install it.
Yeah, I think what they were saying about using ZFS for snapshots before and after install is interesting because it seems like kind of the mainstream vibe that I'm picking up from a lot of the distro makers is that we want to go more towards atomic upgrades. So that would just be part of like how your package manager works. Like for example, Vanilla OS that uses AB root kind of does that right now, where you have an atomic upgrade between those two things, and if something goes wrong, that'll just roll back to the other snapshot. And so I think that that's kind of the future of updates is we'll get these like Delta, updated kind of images, and then you won't have to make your own snapshots. It'll all just be part of how updates work.
Right. I'm not sure it was fair to say that we said that snapshotting wasn't necessary too. My whole point was that if it's not going to be in the kernel, then it's probably not as reliable as people probably think it is as far as having on your root, it's going to work fine with things like Ubuntu and that, but we've got ButterFS for that to a lesser extent, I suppose. I can see the benefit of it, but the licensing is just always going to be an issue, I think. I mean, I've got ZFS everywhere, all that being said, but it just, for me, it's just a different purpose. BSD though, now that's interesting. And the systemd hate, that seems to be a lot of that in this interaction here. I'm not sure where it came from in the beginning. I'm not sure where it comes from now, because it solved a lot of problems and simplified a lot of things. So, and the Docker thing, what somebody explained.
It seemed funny to me that both of our writers today were anti-systemd, and I've seen the hatred going the other direction, that
people don't want to move
getting
away
more
from
used to it
systemd now.
I mean, it was all the vogue in the beginning, wasn't it, to be against it, because it kind of flew in the face of the Unix philosophy, I suppose, if you took everything at all of the messaging at face value. But I think ideas need to evolve with the technology. So
now, you were saying about Docker?
Well, somebody needs to explain to me what he's talking about the how Docker, what did he say? Things get overwritten or
No, okay. Docker is like it's the easiest way I've ever found to explain it is actually completely incorrect. It's miniature VMing. Think of it that way.
well, yeah, I mean, I've got like a
So,
dozen Docker images running. I'm just trying
right.
to understand what he's
Right. The idea is that they don't share libraries.
okay.
So you're rewriting libraries and rewriting libraries. So if you have 10 Docker images and they all use the same libraries, then you're going to have those libraries written 10 times. Now, with Docker in particular, that's not really true because it uses the kernel layer, and so it shares all that. And that
Okay.
was the same thing with Flatpaks and everything else, the only exception being app image, which really is completely isolated from everything else. And so all the libraries are self-contained, and every app image you have, if it doesn't share libraries with other
Yeah.
app images.
And well, first off, with Flatpak and Snap, it's not really a reality, but
It's that's what we were saying.
yeah, with in the case of Docker, I mean, what's the argument here that we're using up more file space? Um,
Yeah, my argument there would be file space is a whole lot cheaper now than it
well,
was a long
yeah,
time
I
ago.
mean, we're living most computers are coming out of Walmart with a terabyte. And what are we talking? These libraries that they're complaining are getting duplicated. Um, how much space are we talking here? A few megabytes here and there, I mean, is that really a problem or is that just something that irritates people? Because the problem that's being solved, in my mind, outweighs any problem of increased disk space. I mean, it solves the problem of compatibility because you've got two choices. If you want to be able to you've
Well,
got all these distributions, you want to be able to support all these things that have all these different tool chains, all these different libraries that they depend on. You can either do Windows style backward compatibility all the way back to the 80s, or you can create a containerized system to where these applications can come with their own runtimes and their own tool chains.
and that was a great thing about Docker when it first started because it was one of the first ones to actually take that mindset.
Right.
But he is right in one portion of that where he talks about Docker images not updating very often.
Yeah.
And essentially, they don't update at all. And if you want to update a Docker image, what you have to do is delete said Docker image and then reinstall it, and then have all your settings stored outside of the Docker image, and then have them saved in the same location and pointed to again. And then hopefully all the settings work with the new version that worked with the old version.
I
So
use
there's a kind of a reason I moved away from Docker when Flatpak, app image, and everything else started working a little bit better. So
I use a project called Watchtower that watches my Docker images and then looks for updates from Docker Hub, and then elegantly, every time I come home and start this thing up, I've got it set up to tell me what changes have been made, and it will rather elegantly upgrade those Docker image. Now I've got to go in and occasionally and do a prune, to get rid of the cruft and that. But so far, and it's been running for about 2 years now. So far, that's been running rather well. So once you've got these things set up, if they're set up right, there is options for keeping it up to date. But I'm
So can
glad that we
put a
have
wrapper on
options.
this thing, Bill?
Yeah, let's do that. Because I guess I do have other things in life. So that's it for the vibrations from the ether. We've got nothing for check this out. Moving on to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. Next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, March 5th, 2023. And there's a link to get that converted to your time zone in the show notes. Next roundtable live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, February 25th, 2023. Next roundtable live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, March 11th, 2023. And there's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. Moving on to the wrap up. Joe, where can we find you at?
Look, if you want to send us some meme mail, you should definitely send it to mintcast
Yes.
at mintcast.org.
Yeah.
Just saying. I'm on a couple other shows. If you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on the Linux Link Tech Show, which is tllts.org. There's the Linux Lugcast, which you can find linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. The link's in the show notes. Moss?
Well, you can hear me every week on Full Circle Weekly News. Every month on Distro Hoppers Digest, roughly. We do about 10 a year on average. My email is bardmoss@pm.me. You can catch me on Mastodon at zyla@hosttux.social. And my other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
You can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm bill_h on Discord. At WCHauser3 at fostodon.org on Mastodon. I'm at WCHauser3 on Twitter, and the same on Facebook. Also, check out my other shows, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. Danny, how about you? Where can we find you at?
Yeah, if you're looking for elementary and elementary OS related stuff, you could go to elementary.io. If you want to write an app and publish it in App Center, or if you've never written apps for a Linux-based operating system before and you want to learn how, definitely go there and check out the develop link. Or if you want to get involved with their open source community, there's a Get Involved page that details all the different ways that even if you're not a developer, you can contribute. And if you're looking for me personally, I have a very small, unstyled page up at dannyrabbit.github.io that has links to all my socials and things like that.
Right on. And again, I want to thank you for being on the show. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Audio Freak, otherwise known as Rio, for our audio editing. Archive.org for hosting our audio files, Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time sync, Bill Hauser for running the Pi 400, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. The Linux development team for the fine distro we love to talk about each fortnight. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co.
And thanks for being here, Danny.
Yeah, thank
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
Yeah, right on.
Well,
that was
now
great.
I will. Oh, just barely over 3 hours.
I knew this would be a 3-hour one. All right.
That's been a fun conversation.
Okay, you need to talk Danny through the